Hello? Oh, there we go. Okay. I'm picking up my mic for some reason. But anyway, there we go. Once again, I didn't manage to eat before starting. So sorry if you can hear me eating salad. Hello, Ragdoll. The meme came very easily to me this time. And I'm hoping that Honeybee will be here to see it. Hello, Amenzicy. Excellent. Thank you. Damn, I thought I had something to talk about. Well, I have been, as I promised, playing Shadow of Mordor, and walking through it, and I have now about 4 separate half-hour rants about me complaining because I played it about 4 times since I downloaded it. And one of the things that I noticed is they do actually, like, sometimes in the codexes they do actually use dates, which infuriates me, and they're the correct dates, which infuriates me more. Like the Durthang Codex has, I think, the date for the Great Plague on it. I'm pretty sure. Yes, the Durthang, which is a fortress inside Mordor that was built to also keep a watch on it. The Durthang Codex says it was in 1640 of the Third Age that they had to pull out of Durthang and the watch and pull out the watch there. So they have some of the. So they did read they read the appendices, which almost makes it worse. It makes it almost worse to me that they read them and then just were like, we can mess around with this. It won't be a problem. But what it also means is that so they're following along with the things that happened in these times, and I just keep thinking back to the scene where Helm Hammerhand and Celebrimbor and Sauron are all in the same room, and I can't stop thinking about it. Where are they putting that? Is that in the Second Age? It's just no. Yes, they're allowed. The messing around is not my issue. They're allowed to mess around. They just have to do it right and with some amount of understanding of what they're actually doing. Hello, Des. Welcome in. I'm talking about Shadow of Water again. Because I am still playing it. Because again, even whilst I am complaining about it constantly, and I do now have each of them that are half-hour complaining voice messages on my phone, I'm still enjoying playing the game, unfortunately. Which is a big frustration for me. I'm also just, as ever, just thinking about Boromir again. Keep thinking. I'm still thinking about. Hello, Alexander. Nice to have you in. Good to see you. I'm still thinking about. This happened on Twitter. I don't know if you've seen Des, but on Twitter they have this thing where they are doing. They're voting for the number one stan of various characters. Oh, you can't just say that. You can't just say that. I just it is so galling to me because you could gamify Boromir's whole life. There are ample opportunities to gamify literally all of Boromir's life. You could turn it into anything you wanted. You could make like a kind of one-off, like in-depth personal journey, like Boromir gets captured, or and you could literally have had Boromir get captured and then have him do stuff with orcs. Like it was not beyond possibility for this to be like there are so many possible ways in which you could have taken Boromir and had him as the main character of a game, a fucking strategy game, ideal for Boromir. Just so many things. But no, you decided to create a new boring man, a boring man, and have him. And I still find it so funny that like there's like a whole scene where Celebrimbor literally with his whole chest like looks at Talion and is like, maybe it was our shared man pain that brought us together. It was our sad man dead wife syndrome that brought us together. And maybe that's why that's why we're connected. And I'm like this is a thing in the game that they think. Sorry, hello 7 stars, 7 stars. Nice to have you in. And Raklos, I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to ignore it. But yeah, it's just. Oof. I do hope Honeybee comes in to see my meme because it is for and God, this whole episode is for her. Because we are basically 30 pages away from the end of this book, and I'm almost wondering if I want to just kind of try and push forward and finish the book today. Oh, boring me. But it's not. I mean, I guess actually you. No, they would if they were trying to emulate Boromir in. If they're trying to emulate Boromir in a new character, but he's like someone, I think they would have made him more, less kind of Italian introspective, and more like making more mistakes, of course, because Boromir can't have a brain. It says most people. But yeah, so my intent today, which might not go to fruition, is I'm going to try and finish the 2 towers today. I'm going to try and finish the 2 towers today. And I will try and get my way through it. It is 30 pages, which is more than I'm which is more that's true. We could have had a great game about 2 characters who are both called himbos for no reason. Being the connection is the Celebrimbor instead has like a moment where he looks at Boromir and is like, maybe it's because nobody understands us, and that's what drew us together. Our shared sense of being completely misunderstood characters. So yeah. It's very painful thinking about all of the great Boromir games that we could have had, like everything we could have had in any Boromir, like the multiple types of games that could have had Boromir at the center it's painful. It's hard, for me specifically, because I'm a baby. My poor man, he deserves better. He always deserved better. I'll wait for about 5 more minutes to see if Honeybee will come in. And others. Kaz was discussing when we were watching the Clone Wars, he was talking about the idea that Minas Ithil was like the steampunk city, and in my mind, I would say that because I think it was in a letter, or it might have been in an interview. Tolkien, when he was discussing when he was in Venice, he said he went to Venice and he was like, this is Pelargir. And so in my mind, Pelargir is like this this kind of many waterwayed city with levers and pulleys taking you from different water currents and changing the channeling of the water currents and allowing people to move around the city and everything, and as an image that is so compelling to me, which I'm very into. So and I think I would say all of the cities that were built directly after the Exodus and the Akhelabeth, I think all of them would have some manner of kind of mechanical mechanism within them. So, for example, I talk a lot about I don't talk a lot about it, but hello, Prince of Hills, nice to have you in. I talk somewhat about the sewage system that Minas Tirith would have to have. I assume Minas Ithil would have had to have it as well, but because Minas Tirith, by necessity of its image, has to have some kind of yes, the meme is I would please myself with this one, but there has to be, yes, don't shush. I'm sleepy today. Be nice to me. I'm sleepy today. You know how I what I wanted to say was mechanisms, but then I accidentally said mechanical. Anyway, Minas Tirith must have some kind of quite highly developed water plus sewage system. I don't know. Kat, this is what Kaz was saying. I think it was just because he was talking about Minas Ithil having the tower at the top that spins. I'm not sure, but I would say most of the most of the recent builds, the builds that were immediately after the Akhelabeth, they would have some kind of at least the sewage system and water distribution around the city would have to be mechanical. There would be systems that drew water one way and sewage water the other way, and that is a good question. I think it actually would have to do with the Palantir, actually. I mean, it wouldn't be necessary, really. It would be a very strange. I mean, I'm almost wondering if it's more of a aesthetic, more aesthetic than anything else. I think they would have had the ability, but I suppose also with it being right there, you could. I don't know why it was a spinning tower. To give this element of lighthouseness to it, I suppose, aesthetically. But I mean, it wouldn't be necessary for a Palantir, but I guess it might help. No, it wouldn't, because the whole point. No, it wouldn't, because the whole. I mean, I guess you could. It depends on when and where, if you could stop it. Well, okay. The Nazgul, I think, use it for something completely different. I think the Nazgul. Well, see, the thing is, that's the problem. The Minas Tirith, like, if you read what Minas Tirith is like, it is not like any era. There are no cities like Minas Tirith anywhere in the world at any time. It's basically impossible to place Middle Earth in any specific era of actual Earth time. So Minas Tirith with its kind of domed white, very arcing architecture, with the flowing script across doorways and into shops and houses and things, and you could say aesthetically it has some elements from many places. Maybe Byzantine is often suggested. It's not like Rome. There's nothing Roman about the architecture of Gondor. I place it, it's never mentioned in any of the actual discussions, I place it in Mughal India, because if you think about just the Taj Mahal as a very domed white building with decorative writing over it, I would say that kind of works for a lot of the descriptions of Minas Tirith. But in general, like the tiered system, the tiering itself is so unworkable as a city. Like, can you imagine? Because there's only one entrance and exit to Minas Tirith. That is mad. That's mad that it's a city that, but it's still, but the issue is that it does function. The issue is that it does actually function. So because it functions, you have to kind of try and figure out how it functions. And like and I love that, because it just means I by necessity I have to add in more more development and more learnedness to Minas Tirith and Gondor as a whole, because otherwise Minas Tirith as a city just simply wouldn't fucking work. I mean, it's not just a fire hazard; it's like a health hazard. It's a traffic hazard. It has issues with sickness and water and just delivery. Like, how does stuff get to the top of the? Why would you want to live at the top of Minas Tirith when it would take so long for everybody to get up there? Exactly, it's an OSHA hellscape, and yet it's not. It is a fully functional running city that has been operating perfectly well for the past 3,000 years. So somehow it has to work. There has to be a lot in it, and a lot under it, and a lot within the bones of the city that just mean that water gets distributed everywhere. Like, they have taps. They must have taps. They must have running water all over the place. I imagine the streams from Mindoluin get used as kind of pumping systems for excrement and all of that kind of thing, and they must have very well defined like times for deliveries, and they must have pulleys. There's the me remembering about Minas Ithil's spinning lighthouse supports my theory that when it's not wartime, there are just built lifts that take you up from. Yeah, they just take you, and they don't have to be magic. They are literally just mechanical winches that take you from that can just lift you up to different levels. You don't have to ride the whole way there. So that must be the case. I still haven't completely figured out how you can only have one exit and entrance into this city without that going absolutely crazy. But again, that must work somehow. There must be like times in which you can enter and exit the city. There has to be times when specific things can enter and exit the city. Like, okay, you can only deliver things in the morning, and then all the rest of the time is for foot traffic, etc., etc. There must be just a ton of stuff, and it makes me very excited when I think about it. We've been waiting for 20 minutes now. Let us start reading if I'm going to be trying to finish this book by the end of the. Sorry, did someone say something at the top? Do we have any not so much real world errors, but within Middle Earth time of styles changing throughout the centuries? Well, I suppose the architecture that we get discussed. So, like, if we're going for like the gradation of eras, Minas Tirith doesn't sound like Meneltama, for example. And I don't think it would work as well because Numenor was so far south as well as west. So it would make more sense for Numenor to have a more kind of, let's say, I don't want to say Roman, but certainly a more many pillared, large, open-aired kind of areas that are tall roofs and things like that weren't so. Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's particularly cold in Minas Tirith in Gondor either. It's a Mediterranean climate, but it's still like it's I would say that Roman derogatory. Yes, exactly. Um. Anyway, anyway, let us get. I'm just gonna have one more bite of my salad. Mm. Keep forgetting to ah. Yeah. So yeah, that's so with they have white. I've never read that bit before, but that's a very unique. Thank you for that tidbit. I love that. So yeah, I would say that it's kind of the development of architecture is quite dramatic, I would say. And I think if you there were probably settlements there already by the mountain men and the kind of the various indigenous populations of Gondor. They must have had, and from the Haradrim as well. I think probably all of those architectural influences from all over the goddamn place, because Umbar was there for so long. Umbar, I think, is one of the earliest havens, so they must have built on top of the kind of architecture from there, and then that architecture spread to Peлагir, or well, maybe sort of in a roundabout way, and then that became the architecture that they used for Middle Earth, blah blah blah, blah, etc. 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 There is a lot to unpack about how Gondor developed as a architectural and yeah. Okay, where did we get to? Hang on. Oh no, I know exactly where we got to. We're all good. So to recap, Faramir had let our boys go, and they scuttled across the very evil, bad Minas Morgul and the Morgul Vale with its bad flowers and its bad river and its bad tower and its bad watchers who are definitely possessed. Like those statues are for real possessed. There's a human soul inside those. And then they climbed up a bit the nameless path, and they got into kind of the top, whereupon the full force, the sable-covered force of Mordor, of Minas Morgul, had been unleashed and were marching their way off to go to war. So it's very, very dramatic. Anyway, so let me hang on. More water is required. Okay. Frodo stirred, and suddenly his heart went out to Faramir. The storm has burst at last, he thought. This great array of spears and swords is going to Oskia. Will Faramir get across in time? He guessed it, but did he know the hour? And who can now hold the fords when the King of the Nine Riders comes? And other armies will come. I am too late. All is lost. I tarried on the way. All is lost. Even if my errand is performed, no one will ever know. There will be no one I can tell. It will be in vain. Overcome with weakness, he wept, and still the host of Morgul crossed the bridge. Then at a great distance, as if it came out of memories of the Shire, some starlit early morning, when the day called and doors were opening, he heard Sam's voice speaking up. "Wake up, Frodo! Wake up!" Had the voice added, "Your breakfast is ready," he would hardly have been surprised. Certainly Sam was urgent. "Wake up, Frodo! They're gone," he said. There was a dull clang. The gates of Minas Morgul had closed. The last rank of spears had vanished down the road. The tower still grinned across the valley, but the light was fading in it. The whole city was falling back into a dark, brooding shade and silence. Yet still it was filled with watchfulness. "Wake up, Frodo! They're gone, and we'd better go too. There's something still alive in that place. something with eyes or a seeing mind if you take me. And the longer we stay in one spot, the sooner it will get onto us. Come on, Frodo. Frodo raised his head and then stood up. Despair had not left him, but the weakness had passed. He even smiled grimly, feeling now as clearly as a moment before he had felt the opposite, that what he had to do now, he had to do if he could, and that whether Faramir or Aragorn or Elrond or Galadriel or Gandalf or anyone else ever knew about it was beside the purpose. He took his staff in one hand and the phial in his other. When he saw that the clear light was already welling through his fingers, he thrust it into his bosom and held it against his heart. Then, turning from the city of Morgul, now no more than a grey glimmer across a dark gulf, he prepared to take the upward road. Gollum, it seemed, had crawled off along the ledge into the darkness beyond, when the gates of Minas Morgul opened, leaving the hobbits where they lay. He now came creeping back, his teeth chattering and his fingers snapping.
"Foolish! Silly!" he hissed. "Make haste! I mustn't think danger has passed. It hasn't. Make haste!"
They still did not answer. They didn't answer, but they did follow him on to the climbing edge. It was little to the liking of either of them, but not even after facing so many other perils. But it did not last long. Soon the path reached a round angle where the mountainside swelled out again, and there it suddenly all entered a narrow opening in the rock. They had come to the first stair that Gollum had spoken of. The darkness was almost complete, and they could see nothing much beyond their hands' stretch, but Gollum's eyes shone pale, several feet above, and he turned back towards them.
"Careful," he whispered. Steps. Lots of steps. Must be careful."
Care was certainly needed. Frodo and Sam at first felt easier, having now a wall on either side, but the stairway was almost as steep as a ladder, and as they climbed up and up, they became more and more aware of the long black fall behind them, and the steps were narrow, spaced evenly, and often treacherous. They were worn and smooth at the edges, and some were broken, and some cracked as foot was set upon them. The hobbit struggled on, until at last they were clinging with desperate fingers to the steps ahead, and forcing their aching knees to bend and straighten. And ever as the stair cut its way deeper into the sheer mountain, the rock walls rose higher and higher above their heads. At length, just as they felt that they could endure no more, they saw Gollum's eyes peering down at them again.
"We're up,"
he whispered.
"First stairs past. Clever hobbits to climb so high. Very clever. Just a few more little steps, and that's all. Yes."
Dizzy and very tired, Sam and Frodo following him, Dizzy and very tired, Sam and Frodo following him, crawled up the last step and sat down, rubbing their legs and knees. They were in a deep, dark passage that seemed still to go up before them, though at a gentler slope and without steps. Gollum did not let them rest long.
"There is another stair still," he said. "Much longer stair. Rest when we get to the top of the next stair. Not yet."
Sam groaned. "Longer, did you say?" he asked.
Yes, longer," said Gollum. "But not so difficult. Hobbits have climbed the straight stair. Next comes the winding stair."
"And after that?" said Sam.
"We shall see," said Gollum softly. "Oh, yes, we shall see."
"I thought you said there was a tunnel," said Sam. "Isn't there a tunnel or something to go through?"
"Oh, yes, there's a tunnel," said Gollum. "But hobbits can rest before they try that. If they get through that, then they'll be nearly at the top. Very nearly, if they get through. Oh, yes."
Frodo shivered. The climb had made him sweat, but now he felt cold and clammy, and there was a chill draught in the dark passage, blowing down from the invisible heights above. He got up and shook himself. "Well, let's go on," he said. "This is no place to sit in." The passage seemed to go on for miles. And always the chill air flowed over them, rising as they went on to a bitter wind. The mountains seemed to be trying with their deadly breath to daunt them, to turn them back from the secrets of the high places, or to blow them away into the darkness behind. They only knew that they had come to the end when suddenly they felt no wall at their right hand. They could see very little. Great black shapeless masses and deep grey shadows loomed above them and about them, but now and again a dull red light flickered up under the lowering clouds, and for a moment they were aware of tall peaks in front and on either side of them, like pillars holding up a vast sagging roof. They seemed to have climbed up many hundreds of feet onto a wide shelf. A cliff was on their left and a chasm to their right. Gollum led the way close under the cliff. For the present they were no longer climbing, but the ground was now more broken and dangerous in the dark, and there were blocks and humps of fallen stone in the way. Their going was slow and cautious. How many hours had passed since they had entered the Morgul Vale, neither Sam nor Frodo could any longer guess. The night seemed endless. At length they were once more aware of a wall looming up, and once more a stairway opened before them. Again they halted, and again they began to climb. It was a long and weary ascent, but this stairway did not delve into the mountainside. Here the huge cliff face sloped backwards, and the path, like a snake, wound to and fro across it. At one point it crawled sideways right to the edge of the dark chasm, and Frodo, glancing down, saw below him, as a vast deep pit, the great ravine at the head of the Morgul Valley. Down in its depths glimmered like a glowworm thread the Wraith Road from the Dead City to the Nameless Pass. He turned hastily away. Still, on and up the stairway went and crawled, until at last, with a final flight, short and straight, it climbed out again onto another level. The path had veered away from the main pass in the great ravine, and now it followed its own perilous course at the bottom of the lesser cleft along the higher regions of the Ethel Dua. Dimly, the hobbits could discern tall piers and jagged pinnacles of stone on either side, between which were great crevices and fissures blacker than the night, where forgotten winters had gnawed and carved the sunless stone. And now the red light in the sky seemed stronger, though they could not tell whether a dreadful morning were indeed coming to this place of shadow, or whether they saw only the flame of some great violence of Sauron in the torment of Gorgoroth beyond. Still far ahead, and still high above, Frodo, looking up, saw as he guessed the very crown of this bitter end. Against the sullen redness of the eastern sky a cleft was outlined in the topmost ridge, a narrow, deep cloven between two black shoulders, and on either shoulder was a horn of stone. He paused and looked more attentively. The horn upon the left was tall and slender, and in it burned a red light, or else the red light in the land beyond was shining through a hole. He saw now. It was a black tower poised above the outer pass. He touched Sam's arm and pointed. "Oh, I don't like the look of that," said Sam. "So this secret way of yours is guarded after all," he growled, turning to Gollum. "As you knew all along, I suppose."
"All ways are watched, yes," said Gollum. "Of course they are. But hobbits must try some way. This may be the least watched. Perhaps they've all gone away to big battle. Perhaps."
"Perhaps," grunted Sam. "Well, it still seems a long way off, and a long way up before we can get there. And there's still the tunnel. I think you ought to rest now, Frodo. I don't know what time of day it is, but we've kept going for hours and hours." "Yes, we must rest," said Frodo. "Let us find some corner out of the wind and gather our strength for the last lap." For so he felt it to be. The terrors of the land beyond and the deed to be done there seemed remote, too far off yet to trouble him. All his mind was bent on getting through or over this impenetrable wall and guard. If once he could do that impossible thing, then somehow the errand would be accomplished, or so it seemed to him in that dark hour of weariness, still labouring in the stony shadows under Cirith Ungol. In a dark crevice between two great piers of rock they sat down. Frodo and Sam a little away within, and Gollum crouched upon the ground near the opening. There the hobbits took what they expected to be their last meal before they went down into the nameless land. Maybe the last meal they would ever eat together. Some of the food of Gondor they ate, and wafers of the way bread of the elves, and they drank a little. But of their water they were sparing, and took only enough to moisten their dry mouths. "I wonder when we'll find water again," said Sam. But I suppose even over there they drink. Orcs drink, don't they? Yes, they drink, said Frodo, but do not let us speak of that. Such drink is not for us. Then all the more need to fill our bottles, said Sam. But there isn't any water up here, not a sound or a trickle that I've heard. And anyway, Faramir said we're not to drink any water in Morgul. No water flowing out of inland Morgul were his words, said Frodo. We're not in the valley now, and if we came upon a spring it would be flowing into it and not out of it. Well, I wouldn't trust it, said Sam. Not till I was dying of thirst. There's a wicked feeling about this place. He sniffed. And the smell, I fancy. Do you notice it? A queer kind of smell. Stuffy. I don't like it. I don't like anything here at all, said Frodo. Step or stone, breath or bone. Earth, air, and water all seem accursed. But so our path is laid. Yes, that's so, said Sam. And we shouldn't be here at all, if we'd known more about it before we started. But I suppose it's too often that way. The brave things in the old tales and songs, Frodo, adventures, as I used to call them, I used to think that they were things the wonderful folk of the stories went out and looked for, because they wanted them, because they were exciting and life was a bit dull, a kind of a sport, as you might say. But that's not the way of it with the tales that really mattered, or the ones that stay in the mind. Folk seem to have been just landed in them. Usually, their paths were laid that way, as you put it. But I expect they had lots of chances, like us, of turning back, only they didn't. And if they had, we shouldn't know, because they'd have been forgotten. We hear about those as just went on, and not all to a good end, mind you. At least not to what folk inside a story and not outside it call a good end. You know, coming home and finding things all right, though quite the same, like old Mr. Bilbo. But those aren't always the best tales to hear. Though they may be the best tales to get landed in. I wonder what sort of tale we've fallen into. I wonder, said Frodo. But I don't know, and that's the way of a real tale. Take any one that you're fond of. You may know or guess what kind of a tale it is, happy ending or sad ending, but the people in it don't know, and you don't want them to. No, sir, of course not. Beren, now, he never thought he was going to get that Silmaril from the Iron Crown in Thangorodrim. And yet he did. And that was a worse place and a blacker danger than ours. But that's a long tale, of course, and goes on past the happiness and into grief and beyond it. And the Silmaril went on and came to Arendelle. And why, sir, I never thought of that before. You've got some of the light of it in that star glass that the lady gave you. Why, to think of it, we're in the same tale still. It's going on. Don't the great tales never end? No, they never end as tales, said Frodo, but the people in them come and go when their part's ended. Our part will end later, or sooner. And then we can have some rest and some sleep, said Sam. He laughed grimly. And I mean just that, Frodo. I mean plain ordinary rest and sleep, and waking up to a morning's work in the garden. I'm afraid that's all I'm hoping for, all the time. All the big important plans, and not for my sort. Still, I wonder if we shall ever be put into songs or tales. We're in one, of course, but I mean put into words, you know, told by a fireside, or read out of a big book with red and black letters, years and years afterwards. And people will say, let's hear about Frodo and the Ring, and they'll say, yes, that's one of my favourite stories. Frodo was very brave, wasn't he, Dad? Yes, my boy, the famousest of hobbits, and that's saying a lot. It's saying a lot too much, said Frodo, and he laughed. A long, clear laugh from his heart. Such a sound he had not been heard in those places since Sauron came to Middle-earth. To Sam suddenly it seemed as if all the stones were listening and the tall rocks leaning over them. But Frodo did not heed them. He laughed again. Why, Sam, he said, to hear you somehow makes me as merry as if the story was already written. But you've left out one of the chief characters, Samwise, the stout-hearted. I want to hear more about Sam, Dad. Why didn't they put in more of his talk, Dad? That's what I like. It makes me laugh. And Frodo wouldn't have got far without Sam, would he, Dad? Well, now, Frodo, said Sam, You shouldn't make fun. I was being serious. Well, so was I, said Frodo, and so am I. We're going on a bit too fast. You and I, Sam, we're still stuck in the worst places of the story, and it is all too likely that some will say at this point, shut the book now, Dad. We don't want to read any more. Well, maybe, said Sam, but I wouldn't be one to say that. Things done and over are made into part of the great tales. Wait, things done and over and made into part of the great tales are different. Why, even Gollum might be good in a tale, better than he is to have by you anyway, and he used to like tales once himself, by his own account. I wonder if he thinks he's the hero or the villain. Gollum, he called. Well, would you like to be the hero? Now, where's he got to again? Yes, it's a wonderfully meta bit of the book, and I love it so much. It's great. Superb. Love it. There was no sign of him. I also like. The only part I would like is Gollum's answer to that question. I would love to have Gollum's answer to that question. Does he think of himself as a villain or a hero? I would love to know. There was no sign of him at the mouth of their shelter, nor in the shadows near. He had refused their food, though he had, as usual, accepted a mouthful of water, and then had seemed to curl up for a sleep. They had supposed that one at any rate of his objects in his long absence the day before had been to hunt or for food to his own liking, and now he had evidently slipped off again while they talked. But what for this time? I don't like his sneaking off without saying, said Sam. And least of all now. He can't be looking for food up here. Not unless there's some kind of rock he fancies. Why, there isn't even a bit of moss. Well, it's no good worrying about him now, said Frodo. We couldn't have got so far, not even within sight of the pass without him. And so we'll have to put up with his ways. If he's false, he's false. All the same, I'd rather have him under my eye, said Sam. All the more so if he's false. Do you remember he never would say if this pass was guarded or no, and now we see a tower here, and it may be deserted, and it may not. Do you think he's gone to fetch them, orcs, or whatever they are? No, I don't think so, answered Frodo, even if he's up to some wickedness. And I suppose that's not unlikely. I don't think it's that, not to fetch orcs or any servants of the enemy. Why wait till now and go through all the labour of the climb and come so near the land he fears? He could probably have betrayed us to orcs many times since we met him. No, if it's anything, it will be some little private trick of his own that he thinks is quite secret. Well, I suppose you're right, Frodo, said Sam. Not that it comforts me mightily. I don't make no mistake. I don't doubt he'd hand me over to the orcs as gladly as kiss his hand. But I was forgetting his precious. No, I suppose the whole time it's been the precious for poor Smeagol. That's the one idea in all his little schemes, if he has any. But how bringing us up here will help him in that is more than I can guess. Very likely he can't guess himself, said Frodo, and I don't think he's got just one plain scheme in his muddled head. I think he really is, in part, trying to save the precious from the enemy, as long as he can. For that would be the last disaster for himself too, if the enemy got it. And in the other part, perhaps, he's just biding his time and waiting on chance. Yes, slinker and stinker, as I've said before, said Sam. But the nearer they get to the enemy's land, the more like slinker will get. Mark my words, if ever we get to the pass, he won't let us really take the precious thing over the border without making some kind of trouble. We haven't got there yet, said Frodo. No, but we'd better keep our eyes skinned till we do. If we're caught napping, Stinker will come out on top pretty quick. Not but what it would be safe for you to have a wink now, Master Frodo. Safe if you lay close to me. I'd be dearly glad to see you have some sleep. I'd keep watch over you, and anyway, if you lay near, with my arm round you, No one could come pouring at you without your Sam knowing it. Sleep, said Frodo, and sighed, as if out of a desert he had seen a mirage of cool green. Yes, even here I could sleep. Well, sleep then, Frodo. Lay your head in my lap. Oh! And so Gollum found them hours later, when he returned, crawling and creeping down the path out of the gloom ahead. Sam sat propped against the stone, his head dropping sideways, and his breathing heavy. Yes, no homo, don't worry about it. Just lay your head on my lap, please. Sat propped against his head drooping sideways and his breathing heavy. In his lap lay Frodo's head, drowned deep in sleep. Upon his white forehead lay one of Sam's brown hands, and the other lay softly upon his master's breast. Sleep was in both their faces. Gollum looked at them. Oh, the tenderness. And Sam's brown hand again. Well, just Sam's brown hand. Sam's brown. Anyway, Gollum looked at them. A strange expression passed over his lean, hungry face. The gleam faded from his eyes, and they went dim, and grey, old and tired. A spasm of pain seemed to twist him, and he turned away, peering back up towards the pass, shaking his head as if engaged in some interior debate. Then he came back, and slowly, putting out a trembling hand, very cautiously he touched Frodo's knee. But almost the touch was a caress. For a fleeting moment, could one of the sleepers have seen him, they would have thought that they beheld an old weary hobbit, shrunken by the years that had carried him far beyond his time, beyond friends and kin, and the fields and streams of youth, a starved, old pitiable thing. But at that touch Frodo stirred, and cried out softly in his sleep, and immediately Sam was wide awake. The first thing he saw was Gollum, pawing at his master, as he thought. "Oi, you!" he said roughly. "What are you up to?"
Nothing, said Gollum softly. Nice, master.
"I dare say," said Sam. "But where have you been sneaking off to? And sneaking back, you old villain?" Oh, that's very poignant, actually. Like literally, like Gollum is literally looking at some tenderness and love and affection that he hasn't experienced for so long, and he's literally turned by it. Maybe this is the moment where Sam is the reason for Gollum not receiving a redemption arc, because he's literally watching something that's just the most human, like tender, loving care that he hasn't experienced in so long, and he might seem just like any other old hobbit, and that's actually quite gutting. Actually, that's actually I'm quite emotional about that. Like, despite the baby eating and everything, I'm really like, he just longs for it so much. He just wants some kind of some tenderness. Oh my, oh dear, oh dear. Gollum withdrew himself, and a green glint flickered under his heavy lids. Almost spider-like he looked now, crouched back on his bent limbs with his protruding eyes. The fleeting moment had passed, beyond recall.
Sneaking, he hissed. Hobbits always so polite, yes. Oh, nice hobbits. Smeagol brings them up secret ways that nobody else could find. Tired he is, thirsty he is, yes, thirsty, and he guides them and he searches for paths, and they say, sneak, sneak. Very nice, friends. Oh, yes, my precious, very nice.
Sam felt a bit remorseful, though not more trustful. "Sorry," he said. "I'm sorry, but you startled me out of my sleep, and I shouldn't have been sleeping, and that made me sharp. But Frodo said but Frodo, he's tired. I asked him to have a wink, and well, that's how it is. Sorry. But where have you been to?"
"Sneaking,"
said Gollum, and the green glint did not leave his eyes. "Oh, very well," said Sam. "Have it your own way. I don't suppose it's so far from the truth. And now we'd better all be sneaking along together." What's the time? Is it today or tomorrow?
It's tomorrow, said Gollum. Or this was tomorrow when hobbits went to sleep. Very foolish, very dangerous. If poor Smeagol wasn't sneaking about to watch.
I think we shall get tired of that word soon, said Sam. But never mind, I'll wake Frodo up. He gently smoothed the hair back from Frodo's brow, and bending down, spoke softly to him. Wake up, Frodo, wake up. Frodo stirred and opened his eyes, and smiled, seeing Sam's face bending over him. Calling me early, aren't you, Sam? He said. It's dark still. Well, yes, it's always dark here, said Sam. But Gollum's come back, Frodo, and he says it's tomorrow, so we must be walking on, the last lap. Frodo drew a deep breath and sat up. The last lap, he said. Gee, there's a lot of tenderness here. Hello, Smeagol. Found any food? Have you had any rest?
No food, no rest, nothing for Smeagol, said Gollum. He's a sneak.
Sam clicked his tongue, but restrained himself. Don't take names to yourself, Smeagol, said Frodo. It's unwise whether they are true or false.
Smeagol has to take what's given him, answered Gollum. He was given that name by kind Master Samwise, the hobbit that knows so much.
Frodo looked at Sam. Yes, sir, he said. I did use that word, waking up out of my sleep sudden and all, and finding him at hand. I said I was sorry, but I soon shan't be. Come, let it pass then, said Frodo. But now we seem to have come to the point, you and I, Smeagol. Tell me, can we find the rest of the way ourselves? We're inside of the pass, of a way in, and if we can find it now, then I suppose our agreement can be said to be over. You've done what you promised, and you're free. Free to go back to food and rest, wherever you wish to go, except to the servants of the enemy. And one day I may reward you, I or those that remember me.
No, not yet, Gollum whined. Oh, no. They can't find the way themselves, can they? Oh, no, indeed. There's the tunnel coming up. Smeagol must go on. No rest, no food, not yet.
And now we come to Shelob's lair. Give me a second, I've got to turn on my light, because it's gotten very dark in here as well. And that's a bit too ominous to read this by. Yes, isn't it just, it's very frustrating for poor Frodo, who's just trying to do a thing, but his servant and boyfriend just keep arguing. Very frustrating for poor Frodo. Let me have another bite of. It is just so, God, it's so tender. I forgot how tender this section is. They really ramp it up here. Sam said he was sorry. He didn't mean to. Listen, Raglos, I also do now love Gollum. I love him actually so much. And I'm very glad that you, I suppose, opened the doorway for me to love him as much as I do now. Because I do love him very much. I did not think about him nearly enough my first few read-throughs of the book. But now I love him. Love triangle. No. You can no. You if romantically you can go ahead and keep in mind, but I will be his best friend if I can. I love the fact that that Sam was literally describing you. He was describing you. Well, I suppose he's not. He was describing me more than you. When he said maybe some people will like Gollum, even if they don't necessarily want him as a traveling companion. Maybe some people will actually like Gollum a lot, and that's I guess that's me and you. He was talking about us, but I think actually you'd quite like him to have as a traveling companion. I imagine. I also love salad very much. Salad is a very good food. I like it very much. Okay. Ah. Mm. Shelob's lair. It is such a shame that Honeybee is not here. I'm very sad. Poor Honeybee, missing out on her wife. It may indeed have been daytime now, as Gollum said, but the hobbits could see very little difference. Unless, perhaps, the heavy sky above was less utterly black, more like a great roof of smoke, while instead of the darkness of deep night, which lingered still in the cracks and holes, a grey blurring shadow shrouded the stony world about them. They passed on, Gollum in front and the hobbits now side by side. That was such a long sentence. That was such a long sentence. How many fucking commas did you put in that sentence, Tolkien? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 commas were in that sentence. Yes, you should. I agree. Yes, please do that for me. The way I manage to read things now is by having it read to me. I've discovered. So yes, you should do that. They passed on. Gollum in front and the hobbits now side by side, up the long ravine between the piers and columns of torn and weathered rock, standing like huge unshapen statues in either hand. There was no sound. Some way ahead, a mile or so, perhaps, was a great grey wall, a last huge upthrusting mass of mountain stone. Darker it loomed, and steadily it rose as they approached, until it towered up high above them, shutting out the view of all that lay beyond. Deep shadow lay before its feet. Sam sniffed the air. "Yuck, that smell," he said. "It's getting stronger and stronger." Presently they were under the shadow, and there in the midst of it they saw the opening of a cave.
"This is the way in," said Gollum softly. "This is the entrance to the tunnel."
He did not speak its name. Torek Ungol, Shelob's lair. Out of it came a stench, not the sickly odour of decay in the meads of Morgul, but a foul reek, as if filth unnameable were piled and hoarded in the dark within. "Is this the only way, Smeagol?" said Frodo.
Yes, yes, he answered. Yes, we must go this way now.
"Do you mean to say you've been through this hole?" said Sam. "Phew! Well, perhaps you don't mind bad smells." Gollum's eyes glinted.
"He doesn't know what we mind, does he, precious? No, he doesn't. But Smeagol can bear things. Yes, he's been through. Oh, yes, right through. It's the only way."
"And what makes the smell, I wonder?" said Sam. "It's like, well, I wouldn't like to say, some beastly hole of the orcs, I'll warrant, with 100 years of their filth in it." "Well," said Frodo, "orcs or no, if it's the only way, we must take it." How could you forget about the beautiful wonderfulness that is Shelob, our girl, our best, the real girl boss of this whole book, the real true, the greatest girl boss in the whole of Tolkien's canon, really, I would say. Drawing a deep breath, they passed inside. In a few steps, they were in utter and impenetrable dark. Not since the lightless passages of Moria had Frodo or Sam known such darkness, and if possible, here it was deeper and denser. There were airs moving, and echoes, and a sense of space. Here the air was still, stagnant, heavy, and sound fell dead. They walked, as it were, in a black vapour wrought of veritable darkness itself that, as it was breathed, brought blindness not only to the eyes but to the mind, so that even the memories of colours and of forms and of any light faded out of thought. Night always had been, and always would be, and night was all. But for a while they could still feel, and indeed the senses of their feet and fingers at first seemed sharpened almost painfully. The walls felt, to their surprise, smooth, and the floor, save for a step now and again, was straight and even, going ever up at the same stiff slope. The tunnel was high and wide, so wide that, though the hobbits walked abreast, only touching the side walls with their outstretched hands, they were separated, cut off, alone in the darkness. Gollum had gone in first, and seemed to be only a few steps ahead. While they were still able to give heed to such things, they could hear his breath hissing and gasping just in front of them. But after a time, their senses became duller. Both touch and hearing seemed to grow numb, and they kept on, groping, walking, on, mainly by the force of the will with which they had entered, will to go through, and desire to come at last to the high gate beyond. Before they had gone very far, perhaps, the time and distance soon passed out of his reckoning, Sam on the right, feeling the wall, was aware that there was an opening at the side. For a moment he caught a faint breath of some air, less heavy, and then they passed it by. "There is more than one passage here," he whispered with an effort. It seemed hard to make his breath give any sound. "It's as like a place as ever there could be." After that, first he on the right and then Frodo on the left passed 3 or 4 such openings, some wider and some smaller, but there was as yet no doubt of the main way, for it was straight and did not turn, and still went steadily up. But how long was it? How much more of this would they have to endure, or could they endure? The breathlessness of the air was growing as they climbed, and now they seemed often in the blind dark to sense some resistance, thicker than the foul air. As they thrust forward they felt things brush against their heads, or against their hands, long tentacles, or hanging growths, perhaps. But they could not tell what they were. And still the stench grew. It grew, until almost it seemed to them that smell was the only clear sense left to them, and that was for their torment. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, how many had they passed in this lightless hole? Hours, days, weeks, rather. Sam left the tunnel side and shrank towards Frodo, and their hands met and clasped, and so together they still went on. At length, Frodo, groping along the left-hand wall, came suddenly to a void. Almost he fell sideways into the emptiness. Here was some opening in the rock far wider than they had yet passed, and out of it came a reek so foul and a sense of lurking malice so intense that Frodo reeled, and at that moment Sam too lurched and fell forwards. Fighting off both the sickness and the fear, Frodo gripped Sam's hand. "Up," he said in a hoarse breath, without voice. "It all comes from here. The stench and the smell. Now for it! Quick!" Calling up his last remaining strength and resolution, he dragged Sam to his feet, and forced his own limbs to move. Sam stumbled beside him. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, at last 6 steps. Maybe they had passed the dreadful unseen opening, but whether that was so or not, suddenly it was easier to move, as if some hostile will for the moment had released them. They struggled on, still hand in hand. But almost at once they came to a new difficulty. The tunnel forked, or so it seemed, and in the dark they could not tell which was the wider way, or which kept nearer to the straight. Which should they take, the left or the right? They knew nothing to guide them, yet a false choice would almost certainly be fatal. Which way is Gollum gone?" panted Sam. "And why didn't he wait?" "Smeagol!" said Frodo, trying to call. "Smeagol!" But his voice croaked, and the name fell dead almost as it left his lips. There was no answer, not an echo, not even a tremor of the air. "He's really gone this time, I fancy," muttered Sam. "I guess this is just exactly where he meant to bring us. Gollum, if ever I lay hands on you again, you'll be sorry for it." Presently, groping and fumbling in the dark, they found that the opening of the left was blocked. Either it was a blind, or else some great stone had fallen in the passage. "This can't be the way," Frodo whispered. "Right or wrong, we must take the other." "And quick," panted Sam. "There's something worse than Gollum about. I can feel something looking at us." They had not gone more than a few yards when from behind them came a sound, startling and horrible in the heavy padded silence, a gurgling, bubbling noise, and a long, venomous hiss. They wheeled round, but nothing could be seen. Still as stones they stood, staring, waiting for what they did not know, for they did not know what. "It's a trap," said Sam, and he laid his hands upon the hilt of his sword, and as he did so, he thought of the darkness of the barrow whence it came. "I wish old Tom was near us now," he thought. Then, as he stood, darkness about him and a darkness of despair and anger in his heart, it seemed to him that he saw a light in his mind, almost unbearably bright at first, as a sun ray to the eyes of one long hidden in a windowless pit. Then the light became colour, green, gold, silver, white, far off, as in a little picture drawn by elven fingers. He saw the Lady Galadriel standing on the grass in Lorien, and gifts were in her hands. "And you, ring-bearer," he heard her say, remote but clear, "for you I have prepared this." The bubbling hiss drew nearer, and there was a creaking as of some great jointed thing that moved with slow purpose in the dark. A reek came on before it. "Frodo! Frodo!" cried Sam, and life and urgency came back to his voice. "The lady's gift! The star-glass! A light to you in dark places, as she said it would be! The star-glass!" "The star-glass?" muttered Frodo, and as one answering out of sleep, hardly comprehending. "Why, yes, how had I forgotten it? A light when all other lights go out. Now indeed light alone can help us." Slowly his hand went to his breast, and slowly he held aloft the phial of Galadriel. For a moment it glimmered, faint as a rising star, struggling in heavy earthward mists, and then, as its power waxed and hope grew in Frodo's mind, it began to burn, and kindled to a silver flame, a minute heart of dazzling light, as though Eärendil had himself come down from it's Eärendil, isn't it? Eärendil had himself come down from the high sunset paths, with the last Silmaril upon his brow. The darkness receded from it, until it seemed to shine in the centre of a globe of airy crystal, and the hand that held it sparkled with white fire. Frodo gazed in wonder at this marvellous gift that he had so long carried, not guessing its full worth and potency. Seldom had he remembered it on the road until they came to the Morgul Vale, and never had he used it for fear of its revealing light. I Yarendil, Elenian, and Kalima, he cried, and knew not what he had spoken, for it seemed that another voice spoke through his, clear, untroubled by the foul air of the pit. But other potencies there are in Middle-earth, powers of night, and they are old and strong, and she that walked in the darkness had heard the elves cry that cry far back in the deeps of time, and she had not heeded it, and it did not daunt her now. Even as Frodo spoke, he felt a great malice bent upon him, and a deadly regard considering him. Not far down the tunnel between them and the opening, where they had reeled and stumbled, he was aware of eyes growing visible, 2 great clusters of many-windowed eyes. The coming menace was unmasked at last. The radiance of the star-glass was broken and thrown back from their 1,000 facets, but behind the glitter a pale deadly fire began steadily to glow within, a flame kindled in some deep pit of evil thought, monstrous and abominable. Eyes they were, bestial and yet filled with purpose and with hideous delight, gloating over their prey trapped beyond all hope of escape. Frodo and Sam, horror-stricken, began slowly to back away, their own gaze held by the dreadful stare of those baleful eyes. But as they backed, so the eyes advanced. Frodo's hand wavered, and slowly the phial dropped. Then suddenly, released from the holding spell, Then suddenly, released from the holding spell to run a little while in vain panic for the amusement of the eyes, they both turned and fled together. But even as they ran, Frodo looked back and saw the terror that at once the eyes came leaping up behind. The stench of death was like a cloud about him. "Stand! Stand!" he cried desperately. "Running is no use!" Slowly the eyes crept nearer. "Galadriel!" he called, and gathering his courage he lifted up the phial once more. The eyes halted. For a moment their regard relaxed, as if some hint of doubt troubled them. Then Frodo's heart flamed within him, and without thinking what he did, whether it was folly or despair or courage, he took the phial in his left hand, and with his right hand drew his sword. Sting flashed out, and the sharp elven blade sparkled in the silver light, but at its edges a blue fire flickered. Then, holding the star aloft and the bright sword advanced, Frodo, Hobbit of the Shire, walked steadily down to meet the eyes. They wavered. Doubt came into them as the light approached. One by one they dimmed, and slowly they drew back. No brightness so deadly had ever afflicted them before. From sun and moon and star they had been safe underground, but now a star had descended into the very earth. Still it approached, and the eyes began to quail. One by one they all went dark. They turned away, and a great bulk beyond the light's reach heaved its huge shadow in between. They were gone. "Frodo! Frodo!" cried Sam. He was close behind, his own sword drawn and ready. "Stars and glory! But the elves will make a song of that, if ever they heard of it. And may I live to tell and hear them sing! But don't go on, Frodo, don't go down that den. Now's our only chance. Let's get out of this foul hole." And so back they turned once more, first walking and then running, for as they went the floor of the tunnel rose steeply, and with every stride they climbed higher above the stenches of the unseen lair, and strength returned to limb and heart. But still the hatred of the Watcher lurked behind them, blind for a while perhaps, but undefeated, still bent on death. And now there came a flow of air to meet them, cold and thin. The opening, the tunnel's end, at last it was before them. Panting, yearning for a roofless place, they flung themselves forward, and then in amazement they staggered, tumbling back. The outlet was blocked with some barrier, but not of stone, soft and a little yielding it seemed, and yet strong and impervious. Air filtered through, but not a glimmer of any light. Once more they charged and were hurled back. Holding aloft the phial, Frodo looked, and before him he saw a greyness, which the radiance of the star-glass did not pierce, and did not illuminate, as if it were a shadow that, being cast by no light, and no light could dissipate. Across the width and height of the tunnel a vast web was spun, orderly as the web of some huge spider, but denser woven and far greater, and each thread was as thick as rope. Sam laughed grimly. "Cobwebs," he said. "Is that all? Cobwebs! But what a spider! Have at them! Down with them!" In a fury he hewed at them with his sword, but the thread that struck did not break. It gave a little, and then sprang back like a plucked bowstring, turning the blade and tossing up both sword and arm. 3 times Sam struck with all his force, and at last one single cord of all the countless cords snapped and twisted, curling and whipping through the air. One end of it lashed Sam's hand, and he cried out in pain, starting back and drawing his hand across his mouth. "It will take days to clear the road like this. What's to be done? Have those eyes come back?" I feel like I'm slipping into Scottish, but I can't tell. It's hard to say. Ugh. Those eyes come back. "No, not to be seen," said Frodo, "but I still feel that they are looking at me, or thinking about me, making some other plan, perhaps. If this light were lowered, or if it failed, they would quickly come again." "Trapped in the end," said Sam bitterly, his anger rising again above weariness and despair. "Gnats in a net. May the curse of Faramir bite that Gollum, and bite him quick." "Well, that would not help us now," said Frodo. "Come, let us see what Sting can do. It's an elven blade. There are webs of horror in the dark ravines of Beleriand where it was forged, but you must be the guard and hold back the eyes. Here, take the star glass. Do not be afraid. Hold it up and watch." Then Frodo stepped up to the great grey net and hewed it with a wide sweeping stroke, drawing the bitter edge swiftly across a ladder of close-run cords, and at once springing away. The blue gleaming blade shore through them like a scythe through grass, and they leapt and writhed and then hung loose. A great rent was made. Stroke after stroke he dealt, until at last all the web within his reach was shattered, and the upper portion blew and swayed like a loose veil in the oncoming wind. The trap was broken. "Come!" cried Frodo. "On, on!" Wild joy at their escape from the very mouth of despair suddenly filled all his mind. His head whirled as with a draught of potent wine. He sprang out, shouting as he came. It seemed light in the dark lands to his eyes that had passed through the den of night. The great smokes had risen and grown thinner, and the last hours of a sombre day were passing. The red glare of Mordor had died away in sullen gloom. Yet it seemed to Frodo that he looked upon a morning of sudden hope. Almost he had reached the summit of the wall. Only a little higher now. The cleft, Cirith Ungol, was before him, a dim notch in the black ridge, and the horns of rock darkling in the sky on either side. A short race, a sprinter's course, and he would be through. "The pass, Sam!" he cried, not heeding the shrillness of his voice that, released from the choking airs of the tunnel, rang out now high and wild. "The pass! Run, run, and we'll be through before anyone can stop us." Sam came up behind as fast as he could urge his legs, but glad as he was to be free, he was uneasy, and as he ran, he kept on glancing back at the dark arch of the tunnel, fearing to see eyes, or some shape beyond his imagining, spring out in pursuit. Too little did he or his master know of the craft of Shelob. She had many exits from her lair. There, age-long, she had dwelt, an evil thing in spider form, even such as once of old, and an evil thing in spider form, even such as once of old had lived in the land of the elves in the west, that is now under the sea, such as Beren fought in the mountains of terror in Doriath, and so came to Luthien upon the green sward amid the hemlocks in the moonlight long ago. How Shelob came there, flying from ruin, no tale tells, for out of the dark years few tales have come, but still she was there. Who was there before Sauron, and before the first stone of Barad-dûr, and she served none but herself, drinking the blood of elves and men, bloated and grown fat, with endless brooding on her feasts, weaving webs of shadow, for all living things were her food, and her vomit darkness. Far and wide her lesser broods, bastards of the miserable mates, her own offspring that she slew, spread from glen to glen, from the Ethel Duath to the eastern hills, to Dol Guldur and the vastness of Mirkwood. Now hold on, okay. Far and wide her lesser broods, bastards of the miserable mates, her own offspring that she slew. Oh, okay. So what did this is explaining something that I wondered about. So I mean, it doesn't actually explain everything, but she had the spiders in Mirkwood come from Shelob having sons and then mating with those sons and having eggs, which is a lot. But where did they come from? Where did the sons come from? Never mind. But that's one explanation. And then she slays them. Yes, of course. But none could rival her, Shelob the Great, last child of Ungoliant to trouble the unhappy world. Already, years before, Gollum had beheld her, Smeagol, who pried into all dark holes, and in past days he had bowed and worshipped her, and the darkness of her evil will walked through all the ways of his weariness beside him, cutting him off from light and from regret. And he had promised to bring her food, but her lust was not his lust. Little she knew of or cared for towers or rings or anything devised by mind or hand, who only desired death for all others, mind and body, and for herself a glut of life, alone, swollen till the mountains could no longer hold her up, and the darkness could not contain her. But that desire was yet far away, and long now had she been hungry, lurking in her den, while the power of Sauron grew, and light and living things forsook its borders, when the city in the valley was dead, and no elf or man came near, only the unhappy orcs. Poor food and wary, but she must eat, and however busily they delved new winding passages from the pass, and from their tower, ever she found some way to snare them. But she lusted for sweeter meat, and Gollum had brought it to her.
We'll see,
he said often to himself, when the evil mood was on him, as he walked the dangerous road from Emyn to the Morgul Vale.
We'll see. It may well be. Oh, yes. It may well be that when she throws away the bones and the empty garments, we shall find it. We shall get it. The precious. A reward for poor Smeagol who brings nice food, and will save the precious, as we promised. Oh, yes. And when we've got it safe, then she'll know it. Oh, yes, then we'll pay her back, my precious. Then we'll pay everyone back.
My assumption is, yes, she can only breed with the big ones. I just don't see. I mean, maybe because it says here she's the last. Yes, okay, so it says here she's the last child of Ungoliant to trouble the unhappy world. So maybe there were male spiders who were children of Ungoliant, and that's how she bred her own children for a while. And then, but she also ate those. She ate those mates, the siblings. She ate as well because she's a spider, and so she has to eat all her mates, obviously. Which is this whole. God, I love Shelob. I fucking love Shelob so much. I love her so much. She's so cool. I still say that the Middle Earth apocalypse should be Shelob coming out and eating everything. Like that should be the apocalypse, not whatever. Glorious battle. Okay, well, we've got a ways to go.
She's an evil woman, yes, I love her.
I love her so much. Where did I even get to? Oh yes, Gollum. Let me take another drink of water before I get to Gollum. This is a great bit. I fucking love this bit. It's so fucking scary. I love this whole scary bit of this book where it just becomes like a horror story for a brief while. This is terrifying. So he thought in an inner chamber of his cunning, which he still hoped to hide from her, even when he had come to her again and had bowed low before her while his companion slept. And as for Sauron, he knew where she lurked. It pleased him that she should dwell there hungry but unabated in malice, a more sure watch upon that ancient path into his land than any other that his skill could have devised. And orcs, they were useful slaves, but he had them in plenty. If now and again Shelob caught them to stay her appetite, she was welcome. He could spare them, and sometimes as a man may cast a dainty to his cat he called her, but she owns him not. Sauron would send her prisoners that he had no better use for. He would have them driven into her hole, and report back to him of the play she made. So they both lived, delighting in their own devices, and feared no assault, nor wrath, nor any end of their wickedness. Never yet had any fly escaped from Shelob's webs, and the greater now was her rage and hunger. But nothing of this evil which they had stirred up against them did poor Sam know of, except that a fear was growing on him, a menace which he could not see, and such a weight did it become that it was a burden to him to run, and his feet seemed leaden.
No, she's not.
Don't call. I mean, yes, she is technically, but I love her. She's just so fucking evil. Like, she's just so evil, and it's all she wants to do, and I love it so much. I love her so much. Dread was around him, and enemies before him in the past, and his master was in a fey mood, running heedlessly to meet them. Turning his eyes away from the shadow behind and the deep gloom beneath the cliff upon his left, he looked ahead, and he saw two things that increased his dismay. He saw that the sword which Frodo still held unsheathed was glittering with blue flame, and he saw that through the sky behind was now dark, and he saw that though the sky behind was now dark, still the window in the tower was glowing red. Orcs, he muttered. We'll never rush it like this. There's orcs about, and worse than orcs. Then, returning quickly to his long habit of secrecy, he closed his hand about the precious phial which he still bore. Red with his own living blood, his hand shone for a moment, and then he thrust the revealing light deep into a pocket near his breast, and drew his elven cloak about him. Now he tried to quicken his pace. Frodo was gaining on him. Already he was some 20 strides ahead, flitting on like a shadow. Soon he would be lost to sight into that grey world. Hardly had Sam hidden the light of the star-glass when she came. A little way ahead, and to his left, he saw suddenly, issuing from a black hole of shadow under the cliff, the most loathly shape that he had ever beheld. Horrible beyond the horror of an evil dream. Most like a spider she was, but huger than the great hunting beasts, and more terrible than they because of the evil purpose in her remorseless eyes. Those same eyes that he had thought daunted and defeated, there they were alit with a fell light again, clustering in her out-thrust head. Great horns she had, and behind her stork-like neck was her huge swollen body, a vast bloated bag swaying and sagging between her legs. Its great bulk was black, blotched with livid marks, but the belly underneath was pale and luminous, and gave forth a stench. Her legs were bent, and with great knobbed joints, high above her back, and hairs that stuck out like steel spines, and at each leg's end there was a claw. As soon as she had squeezed her soft, squelching body and its folded limbs out of the upper exits from her lair, she moved with a horrible speed, now running on her creaking legs, now making a sudden bound. She was between Sam and Frodo. Either she did not see Sam, or she avoided him for the moment as the bearer of the light, and fixed all her intent upon one prey, upon Frodo, bereft of his phial, running heedlessly up the path, unaware of his peril. Swiftly he ran, but Shelob was smarter. In a few leaps she would have him. Sam gasped, and gathered all his remaining breath to shout, "Look out behind!" he yelled. "Look out, Frodo! I'm—" But suddenly his cry was stifled. A long, clammy hand went over his mouth, and another caught him by the neck, while something wrapped itself around his leg. Taken off his guard, he toppled backwards into the arms of his attacker.
"Got him!"
hissed Gollum in his ear.
"At last, my precious, we've got him, yes. The nasty hobbit. We takes this one. She'll get the other. Oh, yes, Shelob will get him, not Smeagol. She promised. He won't hurt Master at all. But he's got you, you nasty, filthy little sneak."
He spat on Sam's neck. Yes, horns, neck, claws, stalk-like neck. Yes, yes, yes. More of this. I love this. She's like a spider, but not. She's not just a spider. Peter, she's not just a big spider. She has a stalk-like neck and a... Exactly. It's like a spider, but not a spider. We're not talking about a spider. She's not a spider. She just kind of looks a little bit like one. But she's not. Oh god, I love it. Anyway, sorry. Fury at the treachery and desperation at the delay when his master was in deadly peril gave to Sam a sudden violence and strength that he was far beyond anything that Gollum had expected from this slow, stupid hobbit, as he thought him. Not Gollum himself could have twisted more quickly or more fiercely. His hold on Sam's mouth slipped, and Sam ducked and lunged forward again, trying to tear away from the grip on his neck. His sword was still in his hand, and on his left arm, hanging by its thong, was Faramir's staff. Desperately, he tried to turn and stab his enemy, but Gollum was too quick. His long right arm shot out, and he grabbed Sam's wrist. His fingers were like a vice. Slowly and relentlessly he bent the hand down and forward, till with a cry of pain Sam released the sword, and it fell to the ground. And all the while Gollum's other hand was tightening on Sam's throat. Then Sam played his trick. With all his strength he pulled away, and got his feet firmly planted. Then suddenly he drove his legs against the ground, and with his whole force hurled himself backwards. Not expecting even this simple trick from Sam, Gollum fell over with Sam on top, and he received the weight of the sturdy hobbit in his stomach. A sharp hiss came out of him, and for a second his hand upon Sam's throat loosened, but his fingers still gripped the sword hand. Sam tore himself forward and away, and stood up, and then quickly he wheeled away to his right, pivoted on the wrist held by Gollum. Laying hold of the staff with his left hand, Sam swung it up, and down it came with a whistling crack on Gollum's outstretched arm, just below the elbow. With a squeal Gollum let go. Then Sam waded in, not waiting to change the staff from left to right. He dealt another savage blow. Quick as a snake, Gollum slithered aside, and the stroke aimed at his head fell across his back. The staff cracked and broke. That was enough for him. Grabbing from behind was an old game of his, and seldom had he failed in it. But this time, misled by spite, he had made the mistake of speaking and gloating before he had both hands on the victim's neck. Everything had gone wrong with his beautiful plan, since that horrible light had so unexpectedly appeared in the darkness, and now he was face to face with a furious enemy, little less than his own size. This fight was not for him. Sam swept up his sword from the ground and raised it. Gollum squealed, and springing aside onto all fours, he jumped away in one big bound like a frog. Before Sam could reach him, he was off, running with amazing speed back towards the tunnel. Sword in hand, Sam went after him. For the moment he had forgotten everything else but the red fury in his brain and the desire to kill Gollum. But before he could overtake him, Gollum was gone. Then, as the dark hole stood before him and the stench came out to meet him, like a clap of thunder, the thought of Frodo and the monster smote upon Sam's mind. He spun around and rushed wildly up the path, crawling and calling Frodo's name. He was too late. So far, Gollum's plot had succeeded.
Spider crab! Yes, spider crab! Like a frog, yes. Like I love all the. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Gollum's like, oh, I wasn't aware that you had hands to throw. I'll see myself out. Sorry. This was a mistake. Let's all forget that I've made this choice. I'm gone. Fare thee well. Right. Okay. We are on to the choices of Master Samwise. God, I love that bit. So fucking good. That's a great bit. That's so fucking scary. That's so fucking scary. Like you get to it and you're like, it's like yes. I also would be very scared of going to these places. These are terrifying places that I could not go to, and I do not want to go to, and I get it. I get why this is a terrible place. No, Alexander, indeed. It is definitely never, no, smote, very important. Smote is very important. You can probably tell that most of my vocabulary actually does come from the Lord of the Rings. I've been very, I read this when I was, well, my mother read it to me when I was very young, and other similarly large books, but I'm pretty sure, because I saw veritable at one point, and I use veritable a lot in my diction, even though I never see it anywhere else. So I think it must be just this book that made me sound quite so much like a toff as I do. But it is the choices of Master Samwise that we're at, and it's our boy's time to shine. It's fucking Sam's time to just absolutely go off, Sam.
just absolutely go ham. I will have a brief. Actually, in fact, we're going to have a brief break so that I can eat the rest of my supper. I'm going to put the break up. And I will eat the rest of my supper. And then we shall try and get through the last 10-ish pages of the Return of the Two Towers. Which is a terrifying thought, really. Why are you so mean to me? Why are you so mean to me? I have ADHD. By the time I've thought through one thought, I'm already on another thought, and they just merge seamlessly into each other. The thing is, I've done this a lot because I'm thinking a lot about the Return of the King that I'm nearly up to. I'm nearly at the Return of the King, so I'm thinking a lot about it. It is true. I mean, there are only two. I would say there are only two specific towers that I can think of. Like, I would say, because, like, I know it's called the Tower of Ecthelion, and, well, I guess Minas Morgul is often called a tower, I suppose. But I would say it definitely, it surely is. Actually, hang on. Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of towers. I guess so I'm picking up more towers as I think about it, in terms of like towers that would be part of the two towers. Because because I think people always assume that the two towers means Orthanc and Barad-dûr. But actually, now I think about it, Barad-dûr doesn't really come in as a quote unquote character until like Return of the King, really. Like, it's only mentioned. But we get a lot about Minas Morgul as a tower. We talk about it a lot. So I think actually now I think about it, yeah, I think it must be Orthanc and Minas Morgul that he's thinking about. But yeah, it does seem like we all know how terrible it is to try and name a book. But I do feel like realistically speaking, he could have called it The War of the Rohirrim, which is quite funny to me now I think about it. Or I don't know, he could have, yeah. What is it? There's the Fellowship of the Ring is very good. That's a good, because that's a thing that happens. Yeah, it could be any towers. I suppose the issue as well is that it's not like he's not describing an event that happens. Like the Fellowship of the Ring is kind of an event that happens as well as it's like a thing that is in, and the Return of the King is an event that happens. But the two towers are just things that exist, and they always exist in the world, and they exist after this book as well. So it would be. I mean, that would have been a better title, but I guess the issue is that by naming it something, yes. I mean, I can't remember. I don't remember things like. That's just mean. That's just mean and cruel. How dare they? Does this mean the publishers are to blame for this bad title? Yeah, The Return of the King is totally spoiling the story as well. I agree. They're bad. It's a bad title. The Fellowship of the Ring is a good title because that is what it is about. But the other two are just bad. I couldn't at the moment. I couldn't think of a good replacement, but definitely not the two towers. Definitely not what I would have called it. Because even then, the towers are just still a very minor characters in this thing. And they don't seem. It just seems very unnecessary. Ubiquitous. But where would Theoden be returning to? I guess Return of the Witch King could be a thing, but he's already returned, basically. So that would be odd. I would say it's not that ambiguous. There is a king that we know of who is going back to a place. Ah, yes. I see what you mean. Yes, no, no. Theoden's whole thing is. And then already. We've already done it. Yeah. Right. Be back in a sec. have a brief issue with a very large moth in the room, so just hang on while I try to catch it. Mine, moth is free. All right, let's get back. Ugh. What is this? What is this? What is this? A general return to battle. That's actually I like that. The Two Towers gets as near as possible to finding a title to cover the widely divergent books 3 and 4, and can be left ambiguous. It might refer to Isengard and Barad-dûr, or to Minas Tirith and Barad-dûr, or Isengard and Cirith Ungol. On reflection, I prefer for Volume 3 The War of the Ring, since it gets in the ring again, and also is more non-committal and gives less hint about the turn of the story. The chapter titles have been chosen also to give away as little as possible in advance. Oh, well, poor fellow, but I see his problem. I see the issue. I do think he could have found a different name, but I see the issue. Oh, listen, Raklos regularly cites the letters in our server. It's one of my favorite things. It's great. Oh, right. Just drink some water. Can I get a stream what's the word? Latency delay check. A stream delay check. If you could tell me when you hear me say now. And I'll see how long. How long the delay is. Oh, that is not so bad. That's actually pretty good. That's pretty good. Thank you, everyone, for participating. That's actually pretty good. That's fine. We're doing good. Right. Moth freed. Chocolate is being eaten at present. Okay. I should probably get up and get more water, but I will not just yet. I think I have enough of it. Okay. Right. Break officially over. When did you leave, Prince Immerhils? We've gotten to the choices of Master Samwise, so Shelob's attacked Frodo, and Gollum's attacked Sam, and it's been a whole kerfuffle. It's been a big kerfuffle. And we're getting to the even more tender parts. Yes, a lot happened. Okay, but anyway, we're onto the. Oh dear, well, that's a shame. But that's a shame because that bit with Shelob is really scary. Shelob's lair is very scary. But this part is just as good, so we should be alright. The choices of Master Samwise. And this is chapter 10, apparently. Frodo Oh. Why am I connecting to chat? Connecting to chat? That's strange. Oh. Welcome to chat room. Can you all still hear me? Can I get a check in? I had a weird thing. Weird thing on the... I'm not sure if my internet went down. Oh well, okay, good. Never mind them. Never mind them. Well, keep going. Frodo was lying face upward on the ground, and the monster was bending over him, so intent upon her victim that she took no heed of Sam and his cries until he was close at hand. As he rushed up, he saw that Frodo was already bound in cords wound about him from ankle to shoulder, and the monster, with her great forelegs, was beginning half to lift, half to drag his body away. Yes, it's I don't know what it was about either. On the near side of him lay, gleaming on the ground, his elven blade, where it had fallen useless from his grasp. Sam did not wait to wonder what was to be done, or whether he was brave or loyal or filled with rage. He sprang forward with a yell, and seized his master's sword in his left hand. Then he charged. No onslaught more fierce was ever seen in that savage world of beasts, where some desperate small creature armed with little teeth alone will spring upon a tower of horn and hide that stands above its fallen mate. Wait, hang on. Tolkien literally he literally just said. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, that's horrible. I hate that a lot. Hate that very much. Horrible interpretation. But we need to focus on the fact that Tolkien literally just said, he just said it. He literally just said it. Where is the, Tolkien said it. Like, Tolkien himself said it. A small little creature leaping on the back of something terrifying to save its fallen mate. I mean, happy Pride Month. Fucking checkmate homophobes. Like, it's with his whole mouth, he said it. He wrote these words and he edited them and said, yes, this is what I will do. Crazy. Disturbed, as if out of some gloating dream, by his small yell, she turned slowly, the dreadful malice of her gaze upon him. But almost before she was aware that a fury was upon her greater than any she had known in countless years, the shining sword bit upon her foot and shore away the claw. Sam sprang inside the arches of her legs, and with a quick upthrust of his other hand, stabbed at the clustered eyes upon her lowered head. One great eye went dark. Now the miserable creature was right under her, for the moment out of the reach of her sting and of her claws. Her vast belly was above him, and with its putrid light and the stench of it almost smote him down. Still his fury held for one more blow, and before she could sink upon him, smothering him and all his little impudence of courage, he slashed the bright elven blade across her with desperate strength. But Shelob was not as dragons are. No soft spot had she save only her eyes. Knobbed and pitted with corruption was her age-old hide, but ever thickened from within the layer with layer on layer of evil growth. The blade scored it with a dreadful gash, but those hideous folds could not be pierced by any strength of men, not though elf or dwarf should forge the steel or the hand of Beren or of Turin. Yeah. Or of Turin wield it. She yielded to the stroke, and then heaved up the great bag of her belly high above Sam's head. Poison frothed and bubbled from the wound, now splaying her legs. She drove her huge bulk down upon him. Too soon. For Sam still stood upon his feet, and dropping his own sword with both hands, But Sam still stood upon his feet, and dropping his own sword, with both hands he held the elven blade pointed upwards, fending off that ghastly roof. And so Shelob, with the driving force of her own cruel will, with strength greater than any warrior's hand, thrust herself upon a bitter spike. Deep, deep it pricked, as Sam was crushed slowly to the ground. No such anguish had Shelob ever known, or dreamed of knowing, in all her long world of wickedness. Not the doughtiest soldier of old Gondor, nor the most savage orc entrapped, had ever thus endured her, or set blade to her beloved flesh. A shudder went through her. Heaving up again, wrenching away from the pain, she bent her writhing limbs beneath her, and sprang backwards in a convulsive leap. Sam had fallen to his knees by Frodo's head, his senses reeling in the foul stench. His two hands still gripped the hilt of the sword, though the mist before his eyes through the mist before his eyes, he was aware dimly of Frodo's face, and stubbornly he fought to master himself and to drag himself out of the swoon that was upon him. Slowly he raised his head and saw her only a few paces away, eyeing him, her beak drabbling, a spittle of venom, and a green ooze trickling from below her wounded eye. There she crouched, her shuddering belly splayed upon the ground, and great bows of her legs quivering, as she gathered herself for another spring, this time to crush and sting to death. No little bite of poison to still the struggling of her meat, this time to slay and then to rend. Even as Sam crouched, looking at her, seeing his death in her eyes, a thought came to him, as if from some remote voice had spoken, and he fumbled in his breast with his left hand, and found what he sought. The cold and hard and solid it seemed to his touch, in a phantom world of horror, the phial of Galadriel. Galadriel, he said faintly, and then he heard voices far off, but clear, the crying of the elves as they walked under the stars in the beloved shadows of the Shire, and the music of the elves as it came through his sleep in the Hall of Fire in the house of Elrond. Gilthoniel a Elbreth. And then his tongue was loosed, and his voice cried in a language which he did not know. Oh dear, how am I gonna do this? She does have a beak, I know! Beak! Ugh! Elbereth, Gilthoniel, Menel Palandiriel, Lehnanon si Dinuguruthos, Tironin Vanuilos. And with that, he staggered to his feet, and was Samwise the Hobbit, Hamfast's son again. Now you come, you filth, he cried. You've hurt Frodo, you brute, and you'll pay for it. We're going now. We'll settle with you first. Come on, and taste it again. Ooh. As if his indomitable spirit had set its potency in motion, the glass blazed suddenly like a white torch in his hand. It flamed like a star that leapt from the firmament's sears and dark air with intolerable light. No such terror out of heaven had ever burned in Shelob's face before. The beams of it entered into her wounded head and scored it with unbearable pain, and the dreadful infection of light spread from eye to eye. She fell back, beating the air with her forelegs, her sight blasted by inner lightnings, her mind in agony. Then, turning her maimed head away, she rolled aside and began to crawl, claw by claw, towards the opening in the dark cliff behind. Sam came on. He was reeling like a drunken man, but he came on, and Shelob, cowed at last, shrunken in defeat, jerked and quivered as she tried to hasten from him. She reached the hole, and squeezing down, leaving a trail of green-yellow slime, she slipped in, even as Sam hewed a last stroke at her dragging legs. Then he fell to the ground. It was his undomitable spirit! The love I feel, and slime, yes. Love the slime. There's so much to unpack. There's so much to unpack here. There is so much to unpack here, but we don't need to unpack it. We just need to think about... Yes, God, no, Ragnos, you can't say that, no. Oh, not this beautiful moment. We're not thinking about Catholicism right now. We're thinking about Sam and his amazing bravery. And we're thinking about Shelob and Habik. I know it is. I know. Well, that's true, actually. It is quite Pentecostal, that's true. But I don't think, no, this is another thing. This is another thing, like, from Tal Elmar, where, like, you remember how Tal Elmar could, like, speak in the Numenorian tongue, even though he'd never spoken it before, just because, you know, he was genetically predisposed to know a language or some other fucking bullshit. Yes. No, I think it is. Yeah, I think it is that. I think that's what it is. Or at least it's like it's not exactly that, but it's like it's close to that. It's about languages having morals. It's about languages having morals and whatever. Anyway, never mind. Not talking about Tal Elmar today. Not gonna let Tal Elmar ruin this beautiful moment. Yes, I'm moving forward. I'm moving on. Moving on. All right, fine. It's divine intervention. Fine. But I think it's divine intervention with Sel Elmar as well. I think it's both. I think this is all. Yes, yes, exactly. That's what I mean. Thank you so much, Dex, my love. Yes, exactly. You got it. Thank you. Des, you deal with that. I'm gonna read the book again. I'm gonna read the book now. Shelob was gone, and whether she lay long in her lair, nursing her malice and her misery, and in slow years of darkness healed herself from within, rebuilding her clustered eyes, until with hunger like death she spun once more her dreadful snares in the glens of mountains of shadow, this tale does not tell. I mean, I think you just did tell us, though, Tolkien. I love the way he does this. He's like, I have no idea if this very specific thing happens or not, because this tale doesn't tell you about it, but I'm still going to tell you about it. Sam was left alone. Wearily, as the evening of the nameless land fell upon the place of battle, he crawled back to Frodo. Frodo, dear Frodo, he said, but Frodo did not speak. As he had run forward, eager, rejoicing to be free, Shelob, with hideous speed, and had come behind, and with one swift stroke had stung him in the neck. He lay now pale, and heard no voice, and did not move. Frodo, dear Frodo, said Sam, and though a long silence waited, listening in vain. Then, as quickly as he could, he cut away the binding cords and laid his head upon Frodo's breast, and to his mouth, but no stir of life could he find, nor feel the faintest flutter of the heart. Often he chafed Frodo's hands and feet, and touched his brow, but all were cold. Frodo, Frodo, he called, don't leave me here alone. It's your Sam calling. Don't you go where I can't follow. Wake up, Frodo. Oh, wake up, Frodo. My dear, wake up. Then anger surged over him, and he ran about his master's body in a rage, stabbing the air and smiting the stones and shouting challenges. Presently he came back, and bending looked at Frodo's face, pale beneath him in the dusk. And suddenly he saw that he was in the picture that was revealed to him in the mirror of Galadriel in Lorien, Frodo with a pale face lying fast asleep under a great dark cliff. Or fast asleep he had thought then. He's dead, he said. Not asleep, dead. And as he said it, as if the words had set the venom to its work again, it seemed to him that the hue of the face grew livid green. And then black despair came over him, and Sam bowed to the ground, and drew his grey hood over his head, and night came into his heart, and he knew no more. When at last the blackness passed, Sam looked up, and shadows were about him. But for how many minutes or hours the world had gone dragging on, he could not tell. He was still in the same place, and Frodo lay beside him, dead. The mountains had not crumbled, nor the earth fallen into ruin. Ah! that's so, that's so, ah, shit, that's so evocative. Like you know how when you're grieving somebody and you feel like it's really strange that the world doesn't like stop and like horrible things that like you expect there to be some kind of terrible catastrophe, like the world should reflect how terrible this is, but it hasn't, and it's weird. Ugh, Jesus. My God. Anyway, he was still in the mountains had not crumbled, nor the earth fallen into ruin. What shall I do? What shall I do? He said. Did I come all this way with him for nothing? And then he remembered his own voice, speaking words that at the time he did not understand himself at the beginning of their journey. I have something to do before the end. I must see it through, sir, if you understand. But what can I do? Not leave Frodo dead, unburied on the top of the mountain, and go home? Or go on? Go on? He repeated, and for a moment doubt and fear shook him. Go on? Is that what I've got to do? And leave him? Then at last he began to weep, and going to Frodo he composed his body, and folded his cold hands upon his breast, and wrapped his cloak about him, and he laid his own sword to one side, and the staff that Faramir had given at the other. If I'm to go on, he said, then I must take your sword. By your leave, Frodo, but I'll put this one to lie by you, and as it lay by the old king in the barrow, and you've got your beautiful mithril coat from old Mr. Bilbo, and your star glass, Frodo, you did lend it to me, and I'll need it, for I'll always be in the dark now. Jesus. It's too good for me, and the lady gave it to you, but maybe she'd understand. Do you understand, Frodo? I've got to go on. But he could not go, not yet. He knelt and held Frodo's hand, and could not release it, and time went by, and still he knelt, holding his master's hand, and in his heart keeping a debate. Now he tried to find strength to tear himself away, and go on a lonely journey, for vengeance. If once he could go, his anger would bear him down all the roads of the world, pursuing until he had him at last, Gollum. Then Gollum would die in a corner. But that was not what he had set out to do. It would not be worth while to leave his master for that. It would not bring him back. Nothing would. They had better both be dead together, and that too would be a lonely journey. He looked on the bright point of the sword. He thought of the places behind where there was a black brink, and an empty fallen to nothingness. There was no escape that way. That was to do nothing, and not even to grieve. That was not what he had set out to do. What am I to do, then? He cried again, and now he seemed plainly to know the hard answer. See it through. Another lonely journey, and the worst. What? Me alone? Go to the crack of doom and all? He quailed still, but the resolve grew. What? Me? Take the ring from him? Council gave it to him. But the answer came at once. And the council gave him companions, so that the errand should not fail. And you are the last of all the company. The errand must not fail. I wish I wasn't the last, he groaned. I wish old Gandalf was here or somebody. Why am I left all alone to make up my mind? I'm sure to go wrong. And it's not for me to go taking the ring, putting myself forward. But you haven't put yourself forward. You've been put forward. And as for not being the right and proper person, why, Frodo wasn't, as you might say, nor Mr. Bilbo. They didn't choose themselves. Ah, well, I must make up my own mind. I will make it up, but I'll be sure to go wrong. That'd be Sam Gamgee all over. Let me see now. If we're found here, or Frodo's found, and that thing's on him, well, the enemy will get it. And that's the end of all of us, of Lorien and Rivendell and the Shire and all, and there's no time to lose. or it'll be the end anyway. The war's begun, and more than likely things are all going the enemy's way already. No chance to go back with it and get advice or permission. No, it's sit here till they come and kill me over Frodo's body and gets it, or take it and go. He drew a deep breath. Then take it is. He stooped. Very gently he undid the clasp at the neck and slipped his hand inside Frodo's tunic. Then, with his other hand raising the head, he kissed the cold forehead and softly drew the chain over it. And then the head lay quietly back again in rest. No change came over the still face, and by that, by all other tokens, Sam was convinced at last that Frodo had died and laid aside the quest. Goodbye, Frodo, my dear, he murmured. Forgive your Sam. He'll come back to this spot when the job's done, if he manages it, and then he'll not leave you again. Rest you quiet till I come, and may no foul creature come anigh you. And if the lady could hear me and give me one wish, I would wish to come back and find you again. Goodbye. And then he bent his own neck and put the chain upon it, and at once his head was bowed to the ground with the weight of the ring, as if a great stone had been strung on him. But slowly, as if the weight became less, or new strength grew in him, he raised his head, and then with a great effort got to his feet, and found that he could walk and bear his burden. And for a moment he lifted up the phial and looked down at his master, and the light burned gently now with the soft radiance of the evening star in summer, and in that light Frodo's face was fair of hue again, pale but beautiful, with an elvish beauty, as of one who has long passed the shadows. And with the bitter comfort of that last sight, Sam turned and hid the light and stumbled on into the growing dark. Good Lord! Oh my God! Yes, he'll always be in the dark now. Jesus. Yes, Mary Renault reading that whole bit and then just like dead-eyeing Tolkien. He's like, how does it sound? And she just like looks up at him like, Professor? Hello? Anyway, we'll keep going on. We've got more to go. God. Farum is mad. I know the goal. Hello, Jamie, but and just like it's like there are 1,000 different quotes that I could bring up where it's like, you know, he was like at the very like we could debate all day long about whether they were a couple. But Sam was in love with Frodo, and there's no other explanation. The audacity, I know, there's no other explanation. Sam was in love with Frodo for all the time. It's just, yeah, just dudes being bros. He's just sitting over Frodo's body and saying, I don't want to leave him, and when this is done, I'm gonna come back and then I'll die beside you. I'll die here. In fact, I would rather die here. We're gonna keep reading. He had not far to go. The tunnel was some way behind, the cleft a couple of hundred yards ahead or less. The path was visible in the dusk, a deep rut worn in ages of passage, running now gently up in a long trough with cliffs on either side. The trough narrowed rapidly. Soon Sam came to a long flight of broad, shallow steps. Now the Orc Tower was right above him, frowning black, and in it the red eye glowed. But he was hidden in the dark shadow under it. He was coming to the top of the steps, and was in the cleft at last. I've made up my mind, he kept saying to himself, but he had not. Though he had done his best to think it out, what he was doing was altogether against the grain of his nature. Have I got it wrong? He muttered. What ought I to have done? As the sheer sides of the cleft closed about him, before he reached the actual summit, before he looked at last on the path descending into the nameless land, he turned. For a moment, motionless in intolerable doubt, he looked back. He could still see, like a small blot in the gathering gloom, the mouth of the tunnel, and he thought he could see or guess where Frodo lay. He fancied there was a glimmer on the ground down there, Or perhaps it was some trick of his tears. Oh, Jesus! As he peered out at that high stony place where all his life had fallen in ruin. Just dudes being bros! If only I could have my wish, my one wish, he sighed, to go back and find him. Then at last he turned to the road in front and took a few steps, the heaviest and most reluctant he had ever taken. Only a few steps, and now only a few more, and he would be going down and would never see that high place again. And then suddenly he heard cries and voices. He stood still as stone. Orc voices. They were behind him and before him, a noise of tramping feet and harsh shouts. Orcs were coming up to the cleft from the far side, from some entry to the tower perhaps. Tramping feet and shouts behind. He wheeled round. He saw small red lights, torches, winking away down there as they issued from the tunnel. At last the hunt was up. The red eye of the tower had not been blind. He was caught. Now the flicker of approaching torches and the clink of steel ahead was very clear. In a minute they would reach the top and be on him. He had taken too long in making up his mind, and now it was no good. How could he escape, or save himself, or save the ring? The ring. He was not aware of any thought or decision. He simply found himself drawing out the chain and taking the ring in his hand. The head of the Orc company appeared in the cleft right before him. Then he put it on. The world changed, and in a single moment of time filled with an hour of thought. And a single moment of time was filled with an hour of thought. At once he was aware that hearing was sharpened while sight was dimmed, but otherwise than in Shelob's lair. All things about him were now were not dark but vague, while he himself was there in a grey hazy world, alone like a small black solid rock, and the ring, weighing down his left hand, was like an orb of hot gold. He did not feel invisible at all, but horribly and uniquely visible, and he knew that somewhere an eye was searching for him. He heard the crack of stone, and the murmur of water far off in the Morgul Vale, and down away under the rock the bubbling misery of Shelob, groping, lost in some blind passage, and voices in the dungeons of the towers, and the cries of the orcs as they came out of the tunnel, and deafening roaring in his ears, the crash of the feet and the rending clamour of the orcs before him. He shrank against the cliff, but they marched up like a phantom company, grey distorted figures in a mist, only dreams of fear, with pale flames in their hands, and they passed by him. He cowered, trying to creep away into some cranny to hide. He listened. The orcs from the tunnel and the others marching down had sighted one another, and both parties were now hurrying and shouting. He heard them both clearly, and he understood what they said. Perhaps the ring gave understanding of tongues, or simply understanding, especially of the servants of Sauron, its maker, so that if he gave heed, he understood and translated the thought to himself. Certainly the ring had grown greatly in power as it approached the places of its forging, but one thing it did not confer, and that was courage. At present Sam still only thought of hiding and lying low till all was quiet again, and he listened closely. He could not tell how near the voices were. The words seemed almost in a dream, almost in his ears. Oh God, what did I do with the orcs last time? I think I gave them very okay. Let's see how I do with these.
Hola, Gorbog! Gorbag, what are you doing up here? Had enough of war already? Orders, you lubber! And what are you about? And what are you doing, Shagrat? Tired of lurking up here, thinking of coming down to fight? Orders to you. I'm in command of this pass, so speak civil. What's your report? Nothing. Hi, yoy!
A yell broke into the exchange of the leaders. The orcs lower down had suddenly seen something. They began to run, and so did the others.
Hi, hola, here's something lying right in the road. A spy, a spy!
There was a hoot of snarling horns and a babble of baying voices. With a dreadful stroke, Sam was wakened from his cowering mood. They had seen his master. What would they do? He had heard tales of the orcs to make the blood run cold. It could not be borne. He sprang up. He flung the quest and all his decisions away, and fear and doubt with them. He knew now where his place was and had been, at Frodo's side, though what he could do there was not clear. Back he ran down the steps, down the path towards Frodo. How many are there, he thought. 30 or 40, from the tower at least, and a lot more than that from down below, I guess. How many can I kill before they get me? They'll see the flame of the sword as soon as I draw it, and they'll get me sooner or later. I wonder if any song will ever mention it, how Samwise fell in the high pass and made a wall of bodies round his master. No, no song. Of course not, for the ring will be found, and there'll be no more songs. I can't help it. My place is by Frodo. They must understand that. Elrond and the council and the great lords and ladies with all of their wisdom. Their plans have gone wrong. I can't be their ring-bearer, not without Frodo. But the orcs were out of his dim sight now. He had had no time to consider himself, but now he realized that he was weary almost to exhaustion. His legs would not carry him as he wished. He was too slow. The path seemed miles long. Where had they all got into in the mist? There they were again, a good way ahead still, a cluster of figures round something lying on the ground. A few seemed to be darting this way and that, bent like dogs on a trail. He tried to make a spurt. Come on, Sam, he said, or you'll be too late again. Oh, again? Jesus. He loosened the sword in its sheath. In a minute he would draw it, and then there was a wild clamour, hooting and laughing, as something was lifted from the ground.
Hi-yoy! Hi-yoy! Up!
Then a voice shouted,
Now off! The quick way! Back to the Undergate! She'll not trouble us tonight for all the signs.
The whole band of orc figures began to move. 4 in the middle were carrying a body high on their shoulders.
Yahoy!
They had taken Frodo's body. They were off. He could not catch them up. Still he laboured on. The orcs reached the tunnel and were passing in. Those with the burden went first, and behind them there was a good deal of struggling and jostling. Sam came on. He drew the sword, a flicker of blue in his wavering hand, but they did not see it. Even as he came panting up, the last of them vanished into the black hole. For a moment he stood, gasping, clutching his breast. Then he drew his sleeve across his face, wiping away the grime and sweat and tears. Curse the filth, he said, and sprang after them into the darkness. It no longer seemed very dark to him in the tunnel. Rather, it was as if he had stepped out of a thin mist into a heavier fog. His weariness was growing, but his mind hardened all the more. He thought he could see the light of torches a little way ahead, but try as he would, he could not catch up to them. Orcs go fast in tunnels, and this tunnel they knew well, for in spite of Shelob, they were forced to use it often as the swiftest way from the dead city over the mountains. In what far-off time the main tunnel and the great in what far-off time? Oh, sorry. Hang on. Blah, blah. In what far-off time the main tunnel and the great round pit had been made, where Shelob had taken up her abode in ages past, they did not know, but many byways they had themselves delved about it on either side, so as to escape the lair in their goings to and fro on the business of their masters. Tonight they did not intend to go far down, but were hastening to find a side passage that led back to their watchtower on the cliff. Most of them were gleeful, delighted with what they had found and seen, and as they ran they gabbled and yammered after the fashion of their kind. Sam heard the noise of their harsh voices flat and hard in the dead air, and he could distinguish 2 voices from among all the rest. They were louder, and nearer to him. The captains of the 2 parties seemed to be bringing up the rear, debating as they went. Can't you stop your rabble, making such a racket, Shagrat? Grunted the one. We don't want Shelob on us.
Go on, Gorbag, yours are making more than the half of the noise, said the other. But let the lads play. They need not worry about Shelob for a bit, I reckon. She sat on a nail, it seems, and we shan't cry about that. Didn't you see a nasty mess all the way back to that cursed crack of hers? If we've stopped it once, we've stopped it 100 times, so let 'em laugh. And we've stuck a bit of
Black at last. Got something that Lugbirds wants. Lugbirds wants it, eh? What is it, do you think? Elvish it looked to me, but undersized. What's the danger in a thing like that?
Don't know till we've had a look.
Oh ho, so they haven't told you what to expect. They don't tell us all they know, do they? Not by half. But they can make mistakes. Even the top ones can.
Shh, Golag!
Stagrat's voice was lowered, so that even with his strangely sharpened hearing, Sam could only just catch what was said.
They may, but they've got eyes and ears everywhere. Some among my lot, as like as not. But there's no doubt about it. They're troubled by something. The Nazgul down below are. By your account, and Lugbers is too. Something nearly slipped.
Nearly, you say, said Gorbag.
All right, said Shagrat, but we'll talk of that later. Wait till we get to the underway. There's a place there where we can talk a bit while the lads go on.
Shortly afterwards, Sam saw the torches disappear. Then there was a rumbling noise, and just as he hurried up, a bump. As far as he could guess, the orcs had turned and gone into the very opening which Frodo and he had tried and found blocked. It was still blocked. There seemed to be a great stone in the way, but the orcs had got through somehow, for he could hear their voices on the other side. They were still running along, deeper and deeper into the mountain, back towards the tower. Sam felt desperate. They were carrying off Frodo's body for some foul purpose, and he could not follow. He thrust and pushed at the block, and he threw himself against it, but it did not yield. Then, not far inside, or so he thought, he heard the two captains' voices talking again. He stood still, listening for a little, hoping perhaps to learn something useful. Perhaps Gorbag, who seemed to belong to Minas Morgul, would come out, and he could then slip in. No, I don't know, said Gorbag's voice. The messages go through quicker than anything could fly as a rule. But I don't inquire how it's done. Safest not to. Grr, those Nazgul give me the creeps, and they skin the body off of you as soon as look at you, and leave you all cold in the dark on the other side. But he likes them. They're his favourites nowadays, so it's no use grumbling. I tell you, it's no game serving down in the city.
You should try being up here with Shelob for company, said Shagrat.
I'd like to try somewhere where there's none of them, but the war's on now, and when that's over, things may be easier.
It's going well, they say.
They would, grunted Gorbag. We'll see. But anyhow, if it does go well, there should be a lot more room. What do you say? If we get the chance, you and me'll slip off and set up somewhere on our own with a few trusty lads, somewhere where there's good loot, nice and handy, and no big bosses.
Ah, said Shagrat, like old times.
Yes, said Gorbag, but don't count on it. I'm not easy in my mind. As I said, the big bosses, eh? His voice sank almost to a whisper. Even the biggest can make mistakes. Something nearly slipped, you say. I say something has slipped, and we've got to look out. Always the poor Uruks to put slips right, and small thanks. But don't forget, the enemies don't love us any more than they love him, and if they get topsides on him, we're done too. But see here, when were you ordered out?
Oh, about an hour ago, just before you saw us. A message came. Nazgul uneasy, spies feared on stairs, double vigilance, patrol to head of stairs. I came at once.
Bad business, said Gorbag. See here, our silent watchers were uneasy more than 2 days ago that I know, but my patrol wasn't ordered out for another day, nor any message sent to Lugbers either, owing to the great signal going up, and the High Nazgul going off to the war and all that. And then they couldn't get Lugbers to pay attention for a good while, I'm told.
I was busy elsewhere, I suppose, said Shagrat. Big things going on west, they say.
I dare say, growled Gorbag. But in the meantime, enemies have got up the stairs. And what were you up to? You're supposed to keep watch, aren't you? Special orders or no, what are you for?
That's enough. Don't try and teach me my job. We were awake all right. We knew there was funny things going on.
Very funny.
Yes, very funny. Lights and shouting and all. But Sheila was on the go. My lad saw her, and her sneak.
Her sneak? What's that?
You must have seen him. Little thin black fellow, like a spider himself, or perhaps more like a starved frog.
He's been here before. Came out of Lugbers the first time, years ago, and we heard from high up to let him pass, but he's been up the stairs once or twice since then. But we've left him alone. Seems to have some understanding with her ladyship. I suppose he's no good to eat. She wouldn't worry about words from high up. But a fine guard you keep in the valley. He was up here a day before all this racket. Early last night we saw him. Anyway, my lads reported that her ladyship was having some fun, and that seemed good enough for me, until the message came. I thought her sneak had brought her a toy, or that you'd perhaps sent her a present. A prisoner of war or something. I don't interfere when she's playing. Nothing gets Shelob when she's on the hunt. Nothing, you say? Didn't you use your eyes back there? I tell you I'm not easy in my mind. Whatever came up the stairs did get by. It cut her web and got clean out of the hole. That's something to think about.
Ah, well, but she's got him in the end, didn't she?
Got him? Got who? This little fellow? But if he was the only one, then she'd have had him off to her larder before long, and there he'd be now. But if Lugbers wanted him, you'd have to go and get him. Nice for you. But there was more than one.
There's just so much. There's just a lot to unpack. There's a lot to unpack about that whole section. And surprisingly, I was quite surprised. It really suits for like really upper class tough accent. I wasn't sure it was going to go through, but it really suits an upper class tough accent. I was surprised. Like I did not change any of the wording there. So we do not know. The orcs seem to have the orcs seem to be kept in the dark mostly. They talk about bosses a lot, and let's unpack orc life. I am so close to finishing this book. We will unpack orc life after 2 more pages. So give me just like 2 more pages, and then we'll try and unpack what we just read. Where did I get to? At this point, Sam began to listen more attentively, and pressed his ear against the stone. Who put the cords she put around him, Who cut the cords she put around him, Shagrat? Same one as cut the web. Didn't you see that? And who stuck a pin into her ladyship? Same one, I reckon. And where is he? Where is he, Shagrat? Shagrat made no reply. You may well put your thinking cap on if you've got one. It's no laughing matter. No one has ever stuck a pin in Shelob before, as you should know well enough. There's no grief in that, but think, there's someone loose hereabouts, as is more dangerous than any other damned rebel that ever walked, since the bad old times, since the great siege. Something has slipped. And what is it, then? Growled Shagrat.
By all the signs, Captain Shagrat, I'd say there's a large warrior loose. Elf, most likely, with an elf sword, anyway, and an axe as well, maybe. And he's loose in your bounds, too, and you've never spotted him. Very funny indeed, Gorbag spat. Sam smiled grimly at this description of himself. Ah, well, you did
always take a gloomy view, said Shagrat. You can read the signs how you like, but there may be other ways to explain them. Anyway, I've got watchers at every point, and I'm going to deal with one thing at a time. When I've had a look at the fellow we have caught, then I'll begin to worry about something else.
It's my guess you won't find much in that little fellow, said Gorbag. He may have had nothing to do with the real mischief. The big fellow with the sharp sword doesn't seem to have thought him much worth, anyhow. Just left him lying. Regular elvish trick. We'll see. Come on now. We talked enough. Let's go and have a look at the prisoner. What are you going to do with him? Don't forget I spotted him first. If there's any game, me and my lads must be in it. Now, growled Shagrat. I have my orders, and it's more than my belly's worth, or yours, to break them. Any trespasser found by the guard is to be held at the tower. Prisoner is to be stripped. Full description of every article, garment, weapon, letter, ring, or trinket is to be sent to Lugbers at once, and to Lugbers only. And the prisoner is to be kept safe and intact, under pain of death for every member of the guard, until he sends or comes himself. That's plain enough, and that's what I'm going to do. Stripped, eh? Said Gorbag. What, teeth, nails, hair, and all? No, none of that. He's for Lugbers, I tell you. He's wanted safe and whole. You'll find that difficult, laughed Gorbag. You'll find that difficult, laughed Gorbag. He's nothing but carrion now. What Lugbers will do with such stuff I can't guess. He might as well go on in the pot. You fool, snarled Shagrat. You've been talking very clever, but there's a lot you don't know, though most other folk do. You'll be for the pot or for Shelob if you don't take care. Carrion, is that all you know of her ladyship? When she binds with cords, she's after meat. She doesn't eat dead meat, nor suck cold blood. This fellow isn't dead. Sam reeled, clutching at the stone. He felt as if the whole dark world was turning upside down. So great was the shock that he almost swooned. But even as he fought to keep a hold of his senses, deep inside him he was aware of the comment. You fool, he isn't dead, and your heart knew it. Don't trust your head, Samwise. It is not the best part of you. The trouble with you is that you never really had any hope. Now what is to be done? For the moment, nothing, but to prop himself up against the unmoving stone and listen to the vile orc voices. Gone, said Shagrat. She's got more than one poison. When she's hunting, she just gives them a little dab in the neck, and they go as limp as boned fish. And then she has her way with them. Do you remember old Thak? We lost him for days. Then we found him in a corner, hanging up. Hanging up he was, but he was wide awake and glaring. How we laughed. She'd forgotten him, maybe, but we didn't touch him. No good interfering with her. Nah, this little filth. He'll wake up in a few hours, and beyond feeling a bit sick for a bit, he'll be all right. Or he would be if Lugbers would let him alone. And of course, beyond wondering where he is and what's happened to him. And what's going to happen to him, laughed Gorbag. We can tell him a few stories at any rate, if we can't do anything else. I don't suppose he's ever been in lovely Lugbers, so he may like to know what to expect. This is going to be more funny than I thought. Let's go. There's going to be no fun, I tell you, said Shagrat, and he's got to be kept safe, or we're all as good as dead. All right, but if I were you, I'd catch the big one that's loose before you send in any report to Lugbers. It won't sound too pretty to say that you caught the kitten and let the cat escape. The voices began to move away. Sam heard the sound of feet receding. He was recovering from his shock, and now a wild fury was on him. I've got it all wrong, he cried. I knew I would. Now they've got him, the devils, the filth. Never leave, Frodo, never, never. That was my right rule, and I knew it in my heart. May I be forgiven. Now I've got to get him back. Somehow. He drew the sword again and beat on the stone with the hilts, but it only gave out a dull sound. The sword, however, blazed so brightly that now he could see dimly in its light. To his surprise, he noticed that the great block was shaped like a heavy door, and was less than twice his own height. Above it was a dark blank space between the top and the lowest arch of the opening. It was probably only meant to be a stop against the intrusion of Shelob, fastened on the inside, with some latch or bolt beyond the reach of her cunning. With his remaining strength, Sam leapt and caught the top, scrambled up and dropped, and then he ran madly, sword blazing in hand, round a bend and up a winding tunnel. The news that Frodo was still alive roused him to a last effort beyond thought of weariness. He could not see anything ahead, for this new passage twisted and turned constantly, but he thought he was catching the two orcs up. Their voices were growing nearer again. Now they seemed quite close. "Well, that's what I'm going to do," said Shagrat in angry tones. Put him right at the top of the chamber." "What for?" growled Gorbag. "Haven't you any lockups down below?" "He's going out of harm's way, I tell you," answered Shagrat. "See? He's precious. I don't trust all my lads and none of yours. Nor you neither, when you're mad for fun. He's going where I want him and where you won't come if you don't keep civil. Up to the top, I say. He'll be safe there." "Willie," said Sam, "you're forgetting the great big elvish warrior that's loose." And with that he raced round the glass corner, only to find that by some trick of the tunnel, or of the hearing which the ring gave him, he had misjudged the distance. The two orc figures were still some way ahead. He could see them now, black and squat against a red glare. The passage ran straight at last, up an incline, and at the end, wide open, were the high horn of the were great double doors, leading probably to deep chambers far below the high horn of the tower. Already the orcs with their burden had passed inside. Gorbag and Shagrat were drawing near the grate. Sam heard a burst of hoarse singing, blaring of horns, and banging of gongs, a hideous clamour. Gorbag and Shagrat were already on the threshold. Sam yelled and brandished Sting, but his little voice was drowned out in the tumult. No one heeded him. The great doors slammed to. Boom. The bars of iron fell into place inside. Clang. The gate was shut. Sam hurled himself against the bolted brazen plates and fell senseless to the ground. He was out in the darkness. Frodo was alive, but taken by the enemy. Here ends the second part of the history of the War of the Ring. The third part tells of the last defence against the Shadow and the end of the mission of the Ring-bearer in The Return of the King. Yay! That is the Two Towers. Give me 1 second. I will be back in a second. Just need to go to the loo. And then I do want to talk about orcs. Ugh. Right. Yes. Yes, it does say prisoners should be searched for rings. That Sauron is definitely expecting. That's a good point. That's a very good point, Ratglass. Because Gandalf said, this is a happy little point for me. Gandalf said that he'd never suspect that they'd try to destroy the ring. But obviously he does suspect He does, because he's asking them to be searched and taken specifically to Lugbirds. So definitely, and alive but taken by the enemy. So definitely, yes, Sauron expects people to come with the ring, or at least accepts that as a possibility, and he's trying to search for people. So I get to call Gandalf wrong again, which is very nice for me. I'm very confused about the relationship between Gorbag and Shagrat. They sound like both really, really old friends. There's a bit. Hang on. There's a bit. Where is it? Somewhere in here. When they're discussing the way they discuss like there's a slip. Looking for. Are you sure? Are you sure? I don't know. I think I disagree with you. I know it's not what you meant. I do know it's not what you meant. But I actually disagree with you. Why? Yeah, I mean, he is looking for other rings, but I mean, okay, all right. I guess I see what you're talking about. He expects like Galadriel. Yeah, Gandalf and okay, all right, okay. He is expecting Gandalf and Galadriel to try and slip in. Okay. I see what you're saying. I do think, but that also is not necessarily like, because like, I feel like Sauron would expect them to. Yeah, I feel like Sauron would expect, I don't necessarily see that, it's like, I don't necessarily see that expecting Gandalf to sneak in. Like, what would he think Gandalf would be trying to do if he snuck in to Mordor this way? Like, what would he expect to be happening? I don't know about that. I know he's dumb. I do agree with. Yes, I know. But with this situation, why would he? Like, why wouldn't? I don't know. I don't know. I was with you for a while, and now I'm walking it back. Yes, he's expecting to be combated by the other ring bearers. And how can they assassinate? He's just a fucking eye. You can't assassinate this. He's on top of the tower. He's a fucking eye. How would you assassinate him? Can't he just wait? Can't Sauron not die unless the ring is destroyed? Like, I'm sure that's a fact. Isn't that a fact? The ring has to be destroyed to destroy him. There's no other way. Now that I say it, I don't feel like I've ever actually seen that as a thing. As I've never actually. Where has he got a body? No, Raglos, where has he got a body? What are you talking about? I'm hearing you. I'm listening to you. Where has he got a body? I know we've had this discussion before, but I'm still wild about it. He can't have a body still. Where does he have this body? What does it look like? Okay. That doesn't necessarily mean he comes physically. Surely that doesn't necessarily mean he comes physically. I really do. Oh dear, I'm sorry. I'm causing you so much. I know I'm causing you pain. I know, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he comes physically. Surely it doesn't necessarily mean. Okay, give me the proof. Show me the proof. Let me see it with my own eyes. But while yes, all right. Oh, it's very. I'm listening. I'm listening. The gap between the gap between us, me, what I say and what Ragnar says is crafting a very funny situation. I'm sorry for what I previously said. Sorry for what I previously said that is giving you so much pain. But I'm looking at it now. I'm so sorry. Go and find me the quotes. I need to talk about what Shagrat and the other one, Alexander says Shagrat and the other one feel like work spouses who've known each other for too long. It's true. It's literally true. They sound so domestic. And what I forgot is that it's not that they are like briefly thinking about what if we started a farm. What they're saying is, let's go back to farming like we used to do. Like that's what they're saying. He says in the same letter I didn't read for the third week in a row. For the third week in a row. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He describes him physically? Really? Okay, so alright then. Okay. Alright. So the eye is actually just more something that he's looking through. That he's using. He's created it? Like it's like it's a machine? Like a fucking machine that he's created and is looking through every now and then? So that's how he uses the Palantians. Is that he's actually just using them like a normal person. That's crazy. That's a wild fact. Yes. Okay. All right then. I like that. I do like that. It's kind of wild to the idea that like Sauron as a physical being is wandering around Mordor and we never see him like ever. Like we don't even see his body. Yes, that's true. Yes. No. Des isn't saying that the plant that it like the no. Des is saying that in order to use a Palantir, he would have to have a body. No, listen, Gollum. I literally called you Gollum just then. No, I believe you now. I do believe you. But I'm just saying that it's wild to think about that he's just walking around Mordor. I know. It's very funny. I'm sorry that it's so funny. Yes, exactly. Yes. Dessa is agreeing with you, Raklos. Yes. We're all. I am now agreeing. I'm now agreeing with you. Yes, fingers. We're all in agreement, Raklos. I've moved past. I've accepted the fact that Sauron has a physical form. I'm now on how crazy that is, and that we never get to see it, like in a actual way. Like he doesn't come to the battle. We don't see him. I know. No, it's okay. You're full of passion, and I love it very much. My worry is that Sauron has this body. It's not a worry. It's like a thing that's so weird. Sauron has this body, and like we never see it. Yes, I concur with Dessa. I also love it and you very much. Well, no. This is I'm not saying he should come to the battle. What I'm saying is that it is crazy that we have a physically manifested villain who is walking around and doing stuff, and we never see him in the whole book. We don't even know where he dies. We don't even know where he. No, it's Peter Jackson. Well, no, actually, now Peter Jackson. This is quite funny, actually. This is fucking hilarious, actually. Peter Jackson got a backlash, because one of the things that Peter Jackson literally changed in the film was Sauron in his full form coming down to the battle and fighting Aragorn, and he got a backlash from fans. He got a backlash from fans about that, and then he changed it to the big ogre. But he was actually one time PJ was trying to was actually canonically accurate. It was sort of the that's so funny. That's so fucking funny. That's the funniest fucking thing I've ever. All the changes that the fans forced Peter Jackson to make are the worst possible changes. Like they're the changes that he. There's a road to Mount Doom that's being cleaned for him because he comes there. There's a lot to. That's very funny. That's very funny. What are you saying no to now, Regulus? I'm sorry, you're kind of in a distant part. No, I know he wouldn't come to the battle, but it is funny that the anyway, what were we actually supposed to be doing? Orcs. We were supposed to be talking about orcs. Sorry, this is actually very interesting. I want to talk more about this and the fact that Sauron has an actual physical form that we like. What scene? They had him. No. No. Listen, I know he wouldn't come. I know he wouldn't come. That's not my. That's. He was in. Yeah, he was in the big armored one. Peter Jackson had it. He was in his like big armored like. He was in the film in the extent in the. Yes, I know there's video, but he's. Okay, there's proof of pretty Sauron. You've seen it. You've seen it. I believe you. But yes, in the making of documentary, I literally see the thing that I remember is him being in his armored form. That's what I remember in the making of documentary. He's not in his fair form. I do not remember him in his fair form. He's in his armored form when he's in the making of documentary. No, that's not true. He was in his armored form. No, this one is wrong. This time you're swearing. You don't know the peril of what you swear against, because that is not true. He was definitely in his. Send it to me. Go ahead. Go on. I fucking dare you to send me a scene where Sauron is in his fair form instead of his armored form. No. Listen, I trusted you up until this moment, but I know exactly. I can see it in my mind's eye. I know exactly the fight that you're talking about, and he was in his armored form. We can't. Yes. Entertaining. Yes. Entertaining as this is, I want to talk about orcs more. Oh, I'm so sorry, Alexander. Have a very good time at work. Thank you very much for coming. And sleep well and all that. And maybe we'll see you on Wednesday, where we'll start the Return of the King. He transforms? You need to send me this. You need to send me this shit that you're talking about. Who acted him then? Is there an actor for Sauron? What do you like? This is. I don't think. This one time, I'm not following you along this road. This one time, I would listen. If you're going to prove me wrong at this, that's fine. But I do not think anyway. Whilst Raklos tries to find this proof of theirs, the way they just what I was going to say was the fact that the orcs have been living peacefully. Apparently, there was a time when orcs were in fact living in a peaceful manner, in with their farming and whatever, and apparently Gorbag and Shagrat did this before. Where's the thing? Where is it? Where does it say it? Okay. Well, no, yes, now I agree in Raglos. Okay, if there is a frame where he has an elven face, that does technically mean he's in his fair form, I guess. I mean, I don't. No, actually, I don't know about that. Is his armor on? Yeah. I mean, I guess. Yes, okay. If he's 8 feet tall, then it's not his fair form. If he's 8 feet tall, then it's not his fair form, it's his armored war form. Because I don't think he was 8 feet tall when he was in his fair form. I don't want to listen. I'll look at it and I'll debate this later. But we're not talking about the films right now. I want to talk about the Shagrat and Gorbag's long and long and long and dramatic Was he huge in his fair form? Was Sauron huge in his fair form? I suppose that's just never something I'd pictured, but you would definitely know this more than me because I am trying to forget as much as I can about the Silmarillion and any of the stuff before the Second Age or even before the Third Age. I'm trying very hard. So you would know if he was huge. In if he was huge in canon in his fair form, then I'm not sure. I'm not sure then. I would that would be I might not have read that. Or did I read it? I can't remember. And in the same letter. Oh, Jesus. Okay. All right. Okay. I concede. If the only difference between like it would be strange for the only difference between his fair form and his armored form to be that he just puts armor on. Yes, we can argue this in Discord. This is not the point. We're not talking about film. Be gone. I want to talk about Shagrat and Gorbag's long illicit love affair. And I'm trying to find the goddamn quote. Trying to find the quote. Where is it? Okay. Yes. So Gorbag says, we'll see, but anyway, if it does go well, there should be a lot more room. What do you say? If we get a chance, you and me'll slip off and set up somewhere on our own with a few trusty lads, somewhere where there's good loot, nice and handy, and no big bosses. Shagrat says, like old times. So they've done this before. Orcs have been somewhat at peace. I mean, I guess the part where it's good loot, I don't know what loot would mean. Maybe it means something different, but no, if Sam is translating it essentially, he's talking about it in this is their meaning. So does that mean that they were still looting as they were farming? But this is a thing that the orcs have done. The stream registers this. It's on tape. I'm gonna keep talking about Gorbag and Shagrat. I'm gonna keep going. So and also, where is this? There was also something. Where did he say? Because something slipped, and he's saying. No, it says here. Actually, you know what? Hang on. You are also maybe right again. We'll see, but anyway, if it does go well, there should be a lot more room. What do you say? If we get a chance, you and me slip off and set up somewhere on our own with a few trusty lads somewhere where there's good loot, nice and handy, and no big boss. Okay. Yeah, they're not talking about farming, are they? I don't know where I got the idea that they were talking about farming, but no, they're not talking about farming. They're talking about setting up another. Yes, they're talking about setting up like their own mercenary company, basically, and plundering. Okay, which apparently is something that they did before. All right. Okay, they set up a gang, and this is something that they've done before. It's odd that they say that they talk about space though. It's odd that they talk about like there'll be more space. I didn't. No, listen. I don't actually want the orcs to be wholesome. I actually don't, because there's a constant like push pull between how to phrase this. If the orcs have in some way elements to them that are humane or have humanity to them, it makes the whole book much harder to like it gives much more credence to reading that I don't like, ways of reading the books that I don't like. And it takes away from this concept that the orcs are somewhat it takes away from the idea that orcs are somewhat enslaved to Sauron's will, because what you'd think is if they had free will, then they would stop hurting people so much, or they would stop hurting themselves and hurting each other, etc., etc., etc. Oh, we have a hello. Oh, thank you so much. I keep forgetting that. Thank you. Yes. So it means that if they had the ability and had it in the past, decided on their own because they were at leisure to stop pillaging and plundering and murdering people, and each other, then that would mean that they are just like mercenaries who have been paid by Sauron. They're not evil. No, he never did, and it's very. But in with this reading, but it's still like it's just like because the whole it's orcs are such a massive like racially charged issue, and they're so awful, and there's just no way around them. There's no way around them within the story. To like there's no way of trying to like what's the word? There's no way to losing a word. What is it? No, thank you. Reconcile. There's no way to reconcile them being a race with free will with the story in general, and with the heroes that we're supposed to like, and with the tale as it goes. Like there's no way to reconcile those two things if they actually are free-willed peoples. But no, because they do have culture. They do have culture and music, and they definitely do have culture and music, which we realize at the beginning of the book. We have orc trials. We have orc crisis of faith at the beginning and the end of this book, because at the beginning of the book they were talking about music, and they were talking about language, and the northern orcs versus the Uruk-hai. Yes, and that's the other thing. Like at the end, when Sauron is killed, the orcs all they go mad, as far as I remember. I mean, I can't remember, but they go mad, and some of them kill themselves, and that does not make it sound like they had, traditional free will, as one might call it. But I find that so hard to reconcile with the fact that they have actual culture as well. The whole thing is just. Oh, bye, Dessa. I'll probably stop in a second, but what was the other thing I was trying to? Oh, yes, that was the other thing I was trying to look at. Where is these quotes? Gorbag and Shagrat say so much. They talk so long. It's so funny. Old times. Something has slipped, and we've looked before it, but the slipped right, no reason why, top side, and we don't fall the here. You understand? Wait. Bad business. Controls. I can get to pay attention. Why is busy elsewhere? There's a bit where he talks about the Great Siege, which I assume is him talking about. I assume is him talking about the Last Alliance, Battle of the Last Alliance. That would be the Great Siege, and it sounds kind of like that was 3,000 years ago. So either orcs have very long, they have history, which again adds way more to the idea that they have some form of traditional free will, as we call it, or they literally remember, as in they're very long lived. Where is it? Where is it? God damn it. Can't find it. I'll be able to control F it on my actual on the book. But yeah, I've been trying to look for something like that for a while because we want to know how long the orcs can actually live naturally. And obviously, like, okay, Gorbek and Shagrat have to be longer lived than since they have to have lived longer than since Sauron returned, because when Sauron returned, they were then fighting for him. So it would make sense that so Gorbet and Shagrat are at least like 500 years old. That would. Is that logic bad? Am I because that's right? Like they had to have been, because if they had a time before where they had where they were, they were made a gang and they were looting and plundering before Sauron returned, and they took up with him and warred for him, that would mean they had to have been before Sauron returned, which was 500 years ago. So, yeah, like, what? So the orcs must be at least 500 years old. Where does it say that? Again, I trust you. I do. I'm sorry for mistrusting you. I concede all the points that you made. There we go. Yes. He says there is no. You may well put on your thinking cap if you've got one. It's no laughing matter. No one's ever stuck a pin in a shoulder before, as you should know well enough. There's no grief in that. But think there's someone loose hereabouts, as is more dangerous than any of the other damned rebels that ever walked since. More dangerous than any other damned rebel that ever walked since the bad old times, since the Great Siege. Something has slipped. Now, that could definitely be interpreted as them just knowing history. But again, that means the orcs know history. Oh no, if you've been slow chatted, I'm so sorry. Okay. It's okay. Okay. So orcs are short-lived, and they just know history. Which is... Okay, but then why? Then how and why? How did they have a time where they were not serving Sauron, if that's the case? There's just so much fun. I think I'll read this again and then see if that I can do a bit more of a preamble. Silencing, but I'm so sorry, Radcliffe. I am very sorry. But if you're saying that it says that somewhere that the orcs live less longer than humans, then I do believe you now. I do believe you. I do believe you, and I will accept your accept what you say. I think, I guess, okay. I suppose that, all right, maybe they're talking about him returning from Dogwaldir, maybe. No, it's fine. I think I get yes, it's fine. Yes, okay. So, but then they're still what, 90 years old, each of them? Like this? Yeah, it's still a really long time ago. It's still a real while back. Like they're still at least 90 years old by now and still fighting. Apparently, I could tell. I could tell. Well, okay. Let's stop. Let's put this to rest. I might read this again and see if I can get a more coherent discussion about it for the preamble next time. But that was